What's going on, everyone? It's H. Potter here. We've got something amazing for you today. What if Harry discovered he was Merlin's last living descendant and inherited every spell ever created? Real quick, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Join thousands of story lovers and hit that subscribe button. Alright, story time. Chapter 1, The Awakening. Harry bolted upright in bed, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead, heart hammering against his ribs. The dream, it felt so real. An old wizard with penetrating eyes and flowing blue robes had been staring at him, speaking words Harry couldn't quite hear but somehow understood deep in his bones. Something about legacy and bloodlines and power waiting to be claimed. Bloody hell, he muttered, reaching for his glasses. The room at Grimmauld Place was dark except for a sliver of moonlight cutting across the floor. Ron snored in the adjacent bed, completely undisturbed. This was the third night in a row he'd had the same dream. Harry ran his fingers through his damp hair, careful to avoid the lightning bolt scar that had been prickling uncomfortably all summer. With Sirius gone, the nightmares had been relentless, but this was something different. This didn't feel like Voldemort. This felt like a call. Harry slid out of bed, careful not to wake Ron. He needed water, air, anything to clear his head. As he passed the dresser, something caught his eye, a faint blue glow coming from the drawer where he'd stashed some of Sirius's personal effects that Remus had given him after the Department of Mysteries disaster. Harry hesitated, then pulled the drawer open. The light pulsed from beneath a stack of photographs. He dug through them until his fingers closed around something cold and metallic. A small amulet, no bigger than a galleon, engraved with symbols he'd never seen before. It definitely hadn't been glowing when Remus had handed over the box. What the? Harry whispered as the amulet warmed in his palm. The symbols began to shift and rearrange themselves, forming words in English. Blood of my blood, the time has come. The room suddenly spun around him. Harry stumbled backward, sitting heavily on his bed as a wave of something crashed through him. Magic, but not like any he'd felt before. Ancient. Vast. Terrifying. Harry. Ron's groggy voice broke through the moment. You alright, mate? Harry quickly closed his fist around the amulet. Yeah. Just another nightmare. Ron mumbled something sympathetic before rolling over, but Harry sat frozen, the amulet burning against his palm like a live coal. Whatever this was, it couldn't be good timing, not with everything else going on. But something told him this wasn't something he could ignore. The next morning at breakfast, Harry couldn't focus on anything Mrs. Weasley was saying about their upcoming trip to Diagon Alley. The amulet was now hanging around his neck, hidden under his t-shirt, its weight unfamiliar but somehow right. Harry, dear, you've barely touched your eggs, Mrs. Weasley said, frowning. Are you feeling ill? I'm fine, Harry said automatically. Just thinking about the new term. 6th year's supposed to be brutal, Ron said through a mouthful of toast. NEWT classes and all that. At least you know who's been quiet, Ginny said, sliding into the seat across from Harry. Dad says there haven't been any attacks in weeks. Harry nodded absently, suddenly very aware of Ginny's presence. The amulet seemed to pulse warmly against his chest when she spoke. Weird. That's not necessarily good news, Hermione said, joining them with a thick book under her arm. It could mean he's planning something bigger. The conversation continued around Harry, but he barely registered it. Last night's dream kept replaying in his mind. The old wizard's face, somehow familiar despite Harry being certain he'd never seen him before. And now this amulet, which seemed to have a mind of its own. Harry, you coming? Ron was standing now, everyone else already headed for the fireplace to flew to Diagon Alley. Yeah, sorry, Harry said, pushing away from the table. As he stood, a surge of magic flooded through him so suddenly he gasped. The lights in the kitchen flickered, and a nearby glass exploded. Everyone froze. What was that? Mrs. Weasley asked, her wand instantly in her hand. Sorry, Harry said quickly. I think that was me. Accidental magic. At your age? Hermione looked skeptical. It happens sometimes when I'm... Harry searched for a plausible explanation. When I'm thinking about Sirius. The mood instantly sobered. Mrs. Weasley's face softened, and she waved her wand to repair the glass. Of course, dear. Perfectly understandable. But as they lined up to use the flue, Ginny caught his eye. She didn't buy it for a second. Harry looked away quickly, not ready to explain something he didn't understand himself. Diagon Alley had changed dramatically since Harry's last visit. Many shops were boarded up, and the few people hurrying along the street moved in tight groups, wands visibly ready. No one browsed or chatted. Even Weasley's wizard wheezes, despite its vibrant exterior, couldn't fully dispel the atmosphere of tension. Blimey, Ron whispered. It's like everyone's waiting for a bomb to go off. Inside Flourish and Blots, Harry tried to concentrate on gathering his school books, but every few minutes, something strange would happen. Books would fly off shelves when he walked past. The lights brightened and dimmed with his breathing. And once, when a small wizard cut in front of him in line, the man's hat turned into a toad. Harry, Hermione hissed, grabbing his arm. What's going on with you? That's the third weird thing in 20 minutes. I don't know, Harry admitted quietly. It started last night. I found this, but before he could tell her about the amulet, a familiar drawling voice interrupted them. Well, if it isn't Potty and the Mudblood, shopping for picture books. Draco Malfoy stood nearby, flanked as always by Crabbe and Goyle. But something was different about him, his usual smirk seemed forced, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Shove off, Malfoy, Harry said, turning away. He wasn't in the mood for Draco's nonsense, not with everything else happening. What's wrong, Potter? Scared without your pet dog father to protect you? Harry's temper flared, and with it came that strange surge of magic again. This time, though, it didn't just burst out randomly. It focused, channeling through Harry like a weapon seeking a target. Before he could even think to stop it, a blast of blue energy shot from his fingertips, not his wand, toward Malfoy. The spell hit Draco square in the chest, lifting him off his feet and pinning him against a bookshelf 10 feet away. But instead of hurting him, golden symbols appeared all over Malfoy's body, glowing briefly before fading. Draco collapsed to the floor, looking shocked but unharmed. What the hell was that, Potter? Malfoy gasped, scrambling to his feet. For once, the fear in his eyes looked genuine. Harry stared at his own hands in disbelief. He hadn't used his wand. He hadn't even used a spell he knew. I don't know. The shop had gone silent, everyone staring. Hermione quickly grabbed Harry's arm and pulled him toward the door. We need to go. Now. They hurried out into the street where they found Ron and Ginny emerging from the Quidditch supply store. What happened? Ron asked, noticing their expressions. You two look like you've seen a ghost. Harry just did magic without a wand, Hermione explained in a furious whisper. In front of half the bookstore. It wasn't on purpose, Harry protested. Malfoy was being a git, and something just happened. What kind of magic? Ginny asked, her expression more curious than alarmed. Harry shook his head. I don't know. It was blue, and there were these symbols that appeared on Malfoy afterward. I've never seen anything like it. We need to tell someone, Hermione insisted. Dumbledore or, no, Harry said firmly. Not until I figure out what's happening. He touched the hidden amulet through his shirt. I think I know where to start looking. Back at Hogwarts a week later, Harry felt simultaneously better and worse. Better because the castle always felt like home, worse because his magical outbursts were becoming more frequent and harder to hide. During their first transfiguration class, he turned his desk into a perfectly detailed medieval throne instead of changing its color. In potions, his draught of living death had glowed with such perfection that even Slughorn had been speechless, before awarding Harry a perfect score and the Felix Felicis prize. And just yesterday, he'd accidentally summoned all the owls in the Ollery to the Gryffindor common room with a casual thought about needing to send a letter. "You have to tell Dumbledore," Hermione insisted for the 100th time as they huddled in a corner of the library. "This isn't normal, Harry, even for you." "I know it's not normal," Harry snapped, then immediately regretted it when Hermione flinched. "Sorry. It's a lot." Ron, who'd been surprisingly calm about the whole situation, looked up from the ancient history book he'd been flipping through. "Have you tried, testing it? Seeing what else you can do?" Harry nodded. "Last night. After everyone was asleep." He hesitated, then admitted, "I cast a spell I've never heard of before." The words just came to me, like I'd known them forever. "What did it do?" Ginny asked. She'd joined their secret discussions after witnessing Harry accidentally vanish and then restore an entire suit of armor during a run-in with Filch. "It showed me the castle," Harry said quietly. "Not just the rooms and corridors, but the magic itself, all the wards and enchantments, layers and layers of them, going back centuries. And there was this one spot." He leaned forward, lowering his voice even further. "There's a chamber, not far from the Room of Requirement, that nobody's opened in over 900 years. How could you possibly know that?" Hermione asked. Harry took a deep breath and finally pulled out the amulet from beneath his robes. "Because of this. I found it among Sirius's things, but I don't think it was really his. I think it was waiting for me." The amulet gleamed in the library's lamplight, its symbols shifting slightly as they all stared at it. "That's..." Hermione reached out, then hesitated. "May I?" Harry nodded and placed it in her palm. Nothing happened. "It's just metal to me," she said, sounding almost disappointed. "What does it do for you?" "It shows me things. Ancient spells. Memories that aren't mine." Harry took the amulet back, instantly feeling its familiar warmth. "And I think it wants me to find that chamber." "Then let's do it," Ron said immediately. "Tonight." "Ron." Hermione looked scandalized. "We can't just go hunting for secret chambers without telling anyone. What if it's dangerous?" "Everything we've ever done at Hogwarts has been dangerous," Ginny pointed out. "At least this time we'd be going in prepared, not stumbling into trouble." Harry felt a rush of gratitude. Despite everything, his friends were still standing by him. "Tonight then," he agreed. "After curfew." The corridors were silent as they made their way to the 7th floor under the invisibility cloak. It was a tight squeeze with all four of them, but they managed, stopping occasionally to check the Marauders' map for patrolling teachers. "It should be right around here," Harry whispered as they approached a blank wall near the Room of Requirement but distinctly separate from it. "It's just stone," Ron said, sounding disappointed. Harry pulled out the amulet, which was now glowing faintly blue. As he held it up to the wall, the glow intensified, and the symbols began to rearrange themselves again. "Speak the words that Merlin spoke, child of the dragon's line." "Merlin?" Hermione whispered. "That's Merlin," Harry finished, the knowledge suddenly filling his mind. His Welsh name was Merlin Emrys. The others stared at him. "How did you know that?" Ron asked. "I don't know," Harry admitted. "I just knew." He stared at the wall, feeling something building inside him, words pressing against his throat demanding release. Without thinking, he pressed his palm against the stone and spoke in a language he'd never learned but somehow understood perfectly, "Ager I edifed Merlin. Datjalu ike Sifrinica I wade Wydraig." The wall shimmered like heat rising from summer pavement, then simply melted away, revealing a circular chamber beyond. Ancient torches flared to life, illuminating walls covered in intricate runes and a stone pedestal in the center. "Bloody hell," Ron breathed. They entered cautiously, the wall re-solidifying behind them. The chamber wasn't large, perhaps the size of their Hogwarts dormitory, but it hummed with tangible power. Bookcases lined the walls, filled with tomes so old their leather bindings had darkened to near black. A worktable stood to one side, covered in what looked like alchemical instruments. And on the stone pedestal in the center rested a large crystal basin similar to a pensieve, but filled with what appeared to be liquid starlight. "Harry, what is this place?" Hermione asked, her voice hushed with awe. Before Harry could answer, the amulet flew from his hand, hovering above the basin. A beam of light connected the two, and suddenly the liquid in the basin formed into the face of the old wizard from Harry's dreams. "My heir," the face spoke, its voice resonant and ancient. At last. Harry stepped forward, drawn by an instinct he couldn't explain. "Who are you?" The face smiled, eyes twinkling with intelligence and power. "I believe you already know, young Harry. I am Merlin, last Archmagus of Avalon, court wizard to Arthur Pendragon, and your ancestor across the long spans of time." "That's impossible," Hermione blurted out. "Merlin lived over 1,000 years ago." The face turned toward her, still smiling. "Ah, a skeptic. Good. My heir will need friends who question rather than simply accept." He looked back at Harry. "Your friend is right to doubt, but magic has always run strongest in bloodlines, Harry Potter. Why do you think you survived the killing curse as an infant? It was not only your mother's sacrifice, though that certainly activated the protection. It was the dormant power in your blood, power that has been waiting for the right moment to awaken." Harry's mind raced. "But, my father's family, they were just wizards. Normal wizards." "Normal?" Merlin's laugh echoed through the chamber. "The Potters descend from the Peverils, who descend from the Gryffindors, who descend from the ancient Brittonic kings, who descend from my own blood. Magic has many branches, but fewer roots than most imagine." "Why now?" Ginny asked suddenly. "Why is this happening to Harry now?" Merlin's expression sobered. "Because the world once again faces a darkness that ordinary magic cannot defeat. Because the one who styles himself Lord Voldemort has delved into magical corruptions even I would not touch." The face turned back to Harry. "And because you, my heir, have reached the age of magical maturity. 17 may be the legal standard today, but 16 is when the old magic recognizes adulthood." "So what does this mean?" Harry asked, gesturing at the strange chamber. "What am I supposed to do?" "Claim your inheritance," Merlin answered simply. "Every spell I ever created. Every enchantment I ever wove. Every secret of magic I ever uncovered. They are yours by right of blood, waiting to be awakened in your mind and soul." The implication staggered Harry. "There must be hundreds. Thousands. 10,473, to be precise," Merlin said. "Though I wouldn't recommend attempting to access them all at once. Your recent outbursts are merely the beginning, the magic responding to your emotions before you've learned to control it." "This is insane," Ron muttered, though he looked more impressed than skeptical. "Indeed, young Weasley. But necessary." Merlin's face grew serious. "Harry must learn to master this inheritance quickly. Others will have felt its awakening. The Ministry. Voldemort. And, others with ancient blood." "Others?" Hermione asked sharply. "You mean there are other heirs like Harry?" A shadow seemed to pass over Merlin's face. "Magic maintains its balance. Where there is light, darkness rises to meet it. My greatest rival also had descendants." "Who?" Harry asked, though some part of him already knew the answer. "Morgan Le Fay," Merlin replied. "And I fear your awakening may trigger the awakening of her heir as well." The next morning, Harry could barely concentrate in classes. His mind was reeling from everything they'd discovered in Merlin's chamber. After the initial revelation, Merlin's manifestation had instructed Harry on how to access the chamber again and how to begin absorbing the magical knowledge safely, a little at a time, through focused meditation with the amulet. "You look terrible," Hermione whispered during charms as they practiced nonverbal shield charms. "Did you sleep at all?" "Not really," Harry admitted. He'd spent most of the night lying awake, the amulet clutched in his hand, feeling magic pulse through him in waves. New spells and incantations kept surfacing in his mind, along with fragments of memories that weren't his, castles and battles and strange lands from centuries past. Professor Flitwick approached their table. "Let's see your progress, Mr. Potter." Harry nodded and raised his wand, preparing to cast a simple shield charm non-verbally. But as he concentrated, something else slipped into his mind, an ancient variation of the spell, far more powerful than the standard Protego. Before he could stop himself, Harry flicked his wand in a complex pattern that his muscles somehow remembered. A dome of iridescent energy erupted around him, expanding to cover not just himself but Hermione and several nearby students. The shield shimmered with intricate runic patterns that shifted and flowed like living things. The classroom fell silent. Professor Flitwick stared, mouth agape, as the shield finally dissipated at Harry's command. "Mr. Potter," Flitwick squeaked, eyes wide with astonishment. That was... Where did you learn such an advanced form of the shield charm?" Harry swallowed hard. "I read about it somewhere, Professor. I've been doing extra studying over the summer." Flitwick looked skeptical but impressed. "Well, 10 points to Gryffindor for exceptional spell work. Though perhaps next time, stick to the assigned spell." Harry nodded, avoiding Hermione's accusatory stare. As soon as Flitwick moved away, she leaned in. "You didn't even try to control it, did you?" "I did." Harry protested quietly. "But it's like the spells want to be used." They pushed themselves forward. Across the room, Harry noticed Draco Malfoy watching him with an odd expression, not the usual sneer, but something more calculating. Their eyes met briefly before Draco looked away, muttering something to Blaise Zabini. After class, Harry hurried to catch up with Ron, who'd been working with Seamus. "I need to be more careful," he muttered. Flitwick definitely noticed something off. "Mate, you cast a shield that probably could have stopped a killing curse," Ron said. Of course he noticed. "Mr. Potter." Harry turned to find Professor McGonagall striding toward him, her expression stern. "A word, if you please." Ron and Hermione exchanged worried glances with Harry before he nodded and followed McGonagall to an empty classroom. "Professor Flitwick has just informed me about your rather extraordinary shield charm," she said once the door was closed. "Would you care to explain?" Harry hesitated. Should he tell her the truth? Dumbledore had been mysteriously absent since the term began, and Harry wasn't sure whom to trust with something this massive. "I've been practicing, Professor," he said cautiously. "After everything that happened at the Ministry last year." McGonagall's expression softened slightly. "While I commend your dedication to self-improvement, Potter, that particular variation of the shield charm hasn't been taught at Hogwarts in over 4 centuries. She fixed him with a penetrating stare. "In fact, I believe the last recorded use of it was by Headmaster Everard in 1635. Harry said nothing, unsure how to respond. "There have been reports," McGonagall continued carefully, "of unusual magical activity around you. Professor Slughorn mentioned your exceptional potion-making. Several portraits reported a disturbance with the suits of armor. And now this." She leaned forward slightly. "Potter, if something is happening, it would be wise to confide in those who might help you." The concern in her voice was genuine, and for a moment, Harry almost told her everything. But Merlin's warning about others sensing his awakening held him back. "I'm fine, Professor," he said with what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "Really? Just trying to be better prepared for whatever's coming." McGonagall studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Very well. But know that my door is always open, Potter." "Always." Harry nodded gratefully and escaped into the corridor, where Ron and Hermione were waiting. What did she want? Hermione asked immediately. She knows something's up, Harry said as they began walking toward the Great Hall for lunch. The shield charm I used apparently hasn't been seen at Hogwarts in 400 years. Harry, you have to be more careful, Hermione urged. If McGonagall's noticed, others will too. It won't take long for word to reach the Ministry, or worse, Voldemort. I'm trying. Harry ran a frustrated hand through his hair. But it's like having a new part of my brain that keeps taking over. Maybe we should practice, Ron suggested. You know, somewhere private where you can let loose a bit, get a feel for these new spells without everyone watching. The room of requirement. Ginny had appeared beside them, falling into step. Harry nodded. Good idea. Tonight after dinner. Before anyone could answer, a commotion erupted at the entrance to the Great Hall. Students were backing away from something, expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. Drawing closer, Harry saw Ministry officials, 3 of them, led by a severe-looking witch he didn't recognize. What's going on? Hermione whispered. Dunno, Ron replied. Dad didn't mention anything about the Ministry coming to Hogwarts. The witch at the front spotted Harry and made a beeline toward him, her colleagues following close behind. Mr. Potter, she said, her voice clipped and official. I am Madame Daria Winchcombe, Department of Mysteries. We'd like a word. Harry felt his stomach drop. The Department of Mysteries? After what had happened there last June. What about, he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Unusual magical signatures have been detected in your vicinity, she said, her eyes sharp behind rectangular glasses. Signatures that warrant investigation. I don't know what you're talking about, Harry said, perhaps too quickly. Madame Winchcombe's lips thinned. I think you do, Mr. Potter. Our instruments are quite precise. She glanced at the crowded entrance hall. Perhaps somewhere more private would be appropriate for this discussion. Professor McGonagall appeared suddenly, inserting herself between Harry and the Ministry officials. Madame Winchcombe, I was not informed of any Ministry visit today. This is a matter of magical security, Professor, Winchcombe replied smoothly. We report directly to the Minister on such issues. Nevertheless, Mr. Potter is a student at this school and under my protection, McGonagall said firmly. Any questioning will be conducted in my presence, and only after proper notification to the headmaster. A tense standoff followed, with students watching wide-eyed from the periphery. Finally, Winchcombe inclined her head slightly. Very well. We shall return with the appropriate documentation. Her gaze returned to Harry, calculating and cool. But I strongly suggest, Mr. Potter, that you consider being forthcoming about recent developments. The Ministry is not your enemy. With that, she and her colleagues turned and departed, leaving a buzz of speculation in their wake. Inside, all of you, McGonagall ordered the gathered students. She turned to Harry. My office, Potter. Now. Harry sat across from McGonagall, the amulet feeling impossibly heavy against his chest. He'd told her the bare minimum, that he'd experienced some unexpected magical growth over the summer, possibly related to turning 16 or the events at the Ministry. He'd carefully avoided any mention of Merlin, the chamber, or his supposed inheritance. McGonagall didn't look convinced. The Department of Mysteries doesn't dispatch senior unspeakables for typical magical development, Potter. I don't know what they want from me, Professor, Harry said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Perhaps not, McGonagall conceded. But their interest is concerning, particularly given the current political climate. The Ministry may claim to acknowledge the Dark Lord's return, but that doesn't mean they've abandoned their interest in controlling you, Potter. Harry nodded, recalling all too vividly Fudge's campaign against him the previous year. I believe, McGonagall continued carefully, that it would be wise to inform Professor Dumbledore of these developments. Unfortunately, he is away on urgent business at present. When will he be back? Harry asked, unable to keep the eagerness from his voice. I cannot say with certainty. McGonagall's expression suggested she was choosing her words with extreme care. The headmaster's current research is of a delicate nature. Harry wondered if it had anything to do with the private lessons Dumbledore had promised but had yet to schedule. Until his return, McGonagall continued, would advise extreme caution, Potter. Practice restraint in your classes. Avoid drawing attention to any unusual abilities you may be developing. Her eyes narrowed slightly. And perhaps consider confiding in those who have proven themselves trustworthy in the past. The hint was clear, and Harry felt a twinge of guilt for not telling her everything. But something held him back, an instinct that whispered this knowledge wasn't meant to be shared widely, not yet. I'll be careful, Professor, he promised. And thank you for stepping in with the ministry. McGonagall nodded. You may go. And Potter, she added as he reached the door. Do remember that being exceptional has never exempted you from the school rules. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, and Harry found himself grinning back despite everything. That evening in the room of requirement, Harry finally had a chance to test his new abilities in a controlled environment. The room had configured itself as a vast training space with reinforced walls, practice dummies, and a variety of objects to transfigure or charm. All right, Hermione said, clipboard in hand, where had she even gotten that? Let's be systematic about this. Start with something simple, a basic charm, and see what happens when you consciously try to access Merlin's version. Harry nodded, drawing his wand and focusing on the levitation charm. Wingardium Leviosa, he said, pointing at a feather the room had provided. The feather rose normally, hovering about 6 feet off the ground. Now try thinking about how Merlin would do it, Ron suggested. Harry closed his eyes, letting his mind open to the new knowledge that had been seeping into his consciousness. Almost immediately, he felt a different incantation form in his mind, along with a specific wandless gesture. Without speaking, Harry moved his hand in a subtle spiral. The feather not only rose higher but began to glow with a soft blue light. Then, to everyone's amazement, it multiplied into a dozen identical feathers, all floating in a perfect formation. Wicked, Ron breathed. That wasn't just levitation, Hermione said, scribbling furiously on her clipboard. That was levitation combined with duplication and some sort of binding charm to keep them in formation. It's called the multiplicity movement, Harry said, the knowledge bubbling up from somewhere deep in his mind. Merlin created it to move multiple objects simultaneously during the construction of Camelot's East Tower. You actually remember that? Ginny asked, looking both impressed and slightly unnerved. Harry nodded slowly. It's like having someone else's memories, but they feel like mine too. It's hard to explain. Try something else, Ron urged. Something bigger. Over the next hour, Harry worked through various spells, each time finding that he could access more advanced, often completely different versions from Merlin's repertoire. A simple warming charm became a controlled magical fire that could burn underwater. A basic unlocking charm evolved into a spell that could identify and dismantle complex magical locks and traps. Most shocking of all was when Harry attempted a stunning spell on one of the practice dummies. Instead of the familiar red beam, his wand produced a ripple of golden energy that not only knocked the dummy backward but briefly suspended it in time, frozen between moments. That's impossible, Hermione whispered. Time magic is strictly regulated by the Department of Mysteries. No one's supposed to know how to do that except unspeakables. Merlin wasn't exactly concerned with ministry regulations, Harry pointed out, lowering his wand as the dummy unfroze and crashed to the floor. Harry, Ginny said suddenly, her voice serious. Try something without your wand. Harry hesitated, then tucked his wand into his pocket. He focused on a target dummy across the room, thinking of a basic reductor curse. With a quick gesture of his hand, blue energy surged from his fingertips, striking the dummy, which didn't just shatter but disintegrated into fine dust. Bloody hell, Ron whispered. Harry stared at his hand in shock. The wandless magic he'd done before had been mostly accidental, triggered by emotion. This was deliberate, controlled, and far more powerful than he'd intended. "I think that's enough for tonight," Hermione said, looking slightly pale. "Wait," Harry said. "There's one more thing I want to try." He closed his eyes, concentrating on a spell that had been floating at the edges of his consciousness since they'd entered the room. The words came in that same ancient language he'd used to open Merlin's chamber, Dangos I me fy Gelinian. Instantly, the room seemed to shift around them, the walls becoming transparent like smoke. Beyond them, Harry could see magical auras moving throughout the castle, hundreds of them, representing the students and staff. Most glowed with gentle light in various colors, but a few burned more intensely. And one, a sickly green aura moving through the dungeons, seemed to pulse with malevolence. "What are we seeing?" Ginny asked, her voice hushed. "Everyone in the castle," Harry replied, watching the auras move. "It's a detection spell Merlin used to locate enemies in Camelot." "That green one," Ron pointed. "Who is that?" Harry focused, and the spell zoomed in, bringing the figure into sharper relief. "Malfoy," he said, not particularly surprised. "He's up to something." But before they could investigate further, a different aura caught Harry's attention, a powerful purple light on the 7th floor, moving rapidly toward them. "Someone's coming," Harry warned, quickly canceling the spell. The room returned to normal just as the door burst open. Professor Snape stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. "Potter," he spat. "The headmaster requires your presence. Immediately." Dumbledore looked older than Harry had ever seen him as he sat behind his desk, his blackened, withered right hand resting on an ancient tome. The office was dimly lit, the portraits of former headmasters pretending to sleep but clearly listening intently. "Sir, you're back," Harry said, relief washing over him. Finally, someone who might actually understand what was happening to him. "Indeed, Harry," Dumbledore said, his voice weary but his blue eyes sharp as ever. "I returned as soon as I received Professor McGonagall's message regarding the Ministry's unexpected visit. And, I must admit, certain other, magical disturbances. I detected from afar." Harry shifted uncomfortably, suddenly very aware of the amulet beneath his robes. "I believe," Dumbledore continued gently, "that you may have discovered something rather significant recently. Something related to your heritage." There was no point denying it. Dumbledore clearly knew, or at least suspected, what was happening. "Yes, sir. I found out I'm descended from Merlin." One of the portraits gave a poor impression of a snore that sounded suspiciously like a gasp. Dumbledore didn't look surprised. "I see. And I presume this discovery was accompanied by certain, magical manifestations?" Harry nodded, then hesitantly reached beneath his robes and withdrew the amulet. It glowed softly in the dim light of the office, the symbols shifting and reforming continuously. Dumbledore leaned forward, studying the amulet with intense interest. "The pendant of Emrys," he murmured. "I had heard rumors, of course, but to see it with my own eyes." He looked up at Harry. "May I?" Harry slipped the chain over his head and handed the amulet to Dumbledore, who examined it carefully, turning it over in his good hand. "Remarkable," he said softly. "A key to Merlin's entire magical legacy, bound to his bloodline." He handed it back to Harry. "And it has awakened for you?" "Yes, sir." Harry returned the amulet to its place around his neck. "There's a hidden chamber near the Room of Requirement. Merlin's chamber. He, or some kind of magical recording of him, spoke to me there." "And what did Merlin tell you, Harry?" Harry hesitated only briefly before recounting everything, the dreams, finding the amulet among Sirius's possessions, the accidental magic, discovering the chamber, and Merlin's warnings about others who would sense his awakening. Dumbledore listened without interruption, his fingers steepled before him. When Harry finished, the office remained silent for a long moment. "I had suspected," Dumbledore finally said, "that there was more to your magical abilities than met the eye, Harry. Few wizards could have produced a corporeal Patronus at 13 or resisted the Imperious Curse so completely at 14. He sighed deeply. However, I did not anticipate this particular development. Merlin's bloodline was thought lost centuries ago. So you believe me? Harry asked, relief evident in his voice. I do, Dumbledore confirmed. Though I confess, the timing is concerning. Because of Voldemort? Partly. Dumbledore rose from his chair and began pacing slowly. Lord Voldemort has always feared that which he does not understand or control. News of your awakening as Merlin's heir would certainly provoke his interest, and his fear. Merlin mentioned that too, Harry said. But he also talked about someone else, Morgan Le Fay's heir. He said my awakening might trigger theirs. Dumbledore stopped pacing, his expression grave. Yes, that is indeed my greater concern. Magical balance is a fundamental law of our world, Harry. Light and dark, creation and destruction, life and death, all exist in eternal opposition and harmony. Merlin and Morgan represented perhaps the greatest such balance in magical history. So who is it? Harry asked. Morgan's heir. I cannot say with certainty, Dumbledore admitted. Just as Merlin's bloodline was obscured by time, so too was Morgan's. There are several ancient families who could potentially carry her legacy. Harry thought of the green aura surrounding Malfoy. Could it be someone at Hogwarts? It's entirely possible, Dumbledore said. In fact, given what we know of magical resonance, it would be logical for both heirs to be drawn to the same magical nexus. He gestured around them. Hogwarts was founded after Merlin's time, but it was built upon a site of great magical significance that both Merlin and Morgan would have known well. A thought struck Harry. Sir, does this change anything about the prophecy? About me and Voldemort? Dumbledore's expression softened. The prophecy speaks of the power the Dark Lord knows not, Harry. Perhaps this inheritance is part of that power. Or perhaps it is something else entirely. He returned to his chair. What I can tell you is that this discovery does not change who you are at your core. Power, even Merlin's power, is merely a tool. What matters is how you choose to use it. Harry nodded, thinking of all the new spells and abilities now at his fingertips. The temptation to use them against Voldemort was strong, but something told him it wouldn't be that simple. There is much we must discuss, Dumbledore continued, about both your inheritance and the task that lies before us in defeating Voldemort. However, I believe those discussions should wait until you have had more time to acclimate to your new abilities. He glanced at the clock on his wall. For now, I suggest you return to your dormitory. The hour grows late, and I suspect your friends are anxiously awaiting news of this meeting. Harry stood to leave but paused at the door. Professor. The ministry officials who came today, they seemed to know something was happening with my magic. How? Dumbledore's expression turned troubled. The Department of Mysteries has ways of detecting significant magical anomalies, particularly those related to ancient power. I shall speak with Minister Scrimgeour about Madame Winchcomb's visit, but I would advise caution, Harry. The ministry's interest in you has always been complex. Harry nodded, understanding the warning. Good night, Professor. Good night, Harry. And remember, while the amulet may have chosen you for your blood, it is your choices that will ultimately define how this power shapes your destiny. The familiar refrain about choices echoed in Harry's mind as he made his way back to Gryffindor Tower, where Ron, Hermione, and Ginny were indeed waiting anxiously by the fire. What happened? Hermione demanded as soon as he climbed through the portrait hole. Harry dropped into an armchair, suddenly exhausted. Dumbledore knows about Merlin, the amulet, all of it. He believes me. That's brilliant. Ron exclaimed. So what's the plan? There isn't one, exactly, Harry admitted. He wants me to keep practicing, to get control of the magic. But he's worried about Morgan Le Fay's heir being awakened too. Did he say who it might be? Ginny asked. Harry shook his head. Just that they might be at Hogwarts, drawn to the same magical center or something. Well, that's just great, Ron muttered. Not like we don't have enough to worry about with you-know-who. I still think Malfoy's involved somehow, Harry said, remembering the sickly green aura. He's been acting strange since we got back, and that detection spell showed something off about him. That doesn't mean he's Morgan Le Fay's heir, Hermione pointed out reasonably. He could just be up to his usual nastiness. Either way, I'm going to keep an eye on him, Harry said firmly. And I'm going to keep practicing with Merlin's spells. If Voldemort or this Morgan heir or the Ministry or whoever else is coming, I need to be ready. The others nodded in agreement, but Harry could see the worry in their eyes. Things were already complicated enough with Voldemort's return. Adding ancient magical bloodlines and inherited powers to the mix only raised the stakes higher. As if reading his thoughts, Ginny reached over and squeezed his hand. You're not alone in this, Harry. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Harry squeezed back, grateful beyond words for their unwavering support. Whatever was happening to him, whatever lay ahead, at least he didn't have to face it alone. Later that night, as Harry lay in bed staring at the canopy above him, the amulet pulsed warmly against his chest. His mind raced with fragments of ancient spells and glimpses of memories from centuries past. Somewhere out there, Voldemort was plotting his next move. Somewhere in the castle, Morgan Le Fay's heir might be discovering their own inheritance. And somewhere between his destiny as the Chosen One and his newly discovered legacy as Merlin's descendant, Harry needed to find his own path forward. As sleep finally began to claim him, one thought remained clear: nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 2, The Inheritance. Harry woke with a pounding headache and fragments of ancient spells tumbling through his mind. Last night's sleep had been anything but restful, more like being trapped in a magical library where the books kept flying open and shoving their contents directly into his brain. You look like hell, Ron said as Harry dragged himself out of bed. Thanks, Harry mumbled, pressing his palms against his temples. Spent most of the night having magical knowledge crammed into my head. Ron perked up. Anything good? Despite the pain, Harry couldn't help but smile. Actually, yeah. I think I've figured out how to enchant that Quidditch strategy board you've always wanted. Seriously? Ron's eyes widened. The one where the players move on their own and execute plays? Yep. Turns out Merlin was a big fan of strategy games. Created a bunch of enchantments for war planning that could work for Quidditch with some tweaking. Wicked. Ron grinned. Maybe this whole Descendant of Merlin thing isn't so bad after all. But as they headed down to breakfast, Harry wasn't so sure. His head felt overstuffed, buzzing with spells and potions and magical theory that spanned centuries. Some of it was fascinating, some terrifying, and all of it overwhelming. The great hall buzzed with the usual morning chatter, but Harry noticed several students watching him curiously as he sat down. News of yesterday's magical displays had clearly spread. Everyone's staring, he muttered to Hermione as she joined them. Can you blame them? She whispered back. First you perform ancient shield magic and charms, then ministry officials show up looking for you, and then Snape dramatically summons you to Dumbledore's office. People are going to talk. Harry groaned. Great. Look on the bright side, Ron said through a mouthful of eggs. At least they're not calling you the heir of Slytherin this time. Not yet, anyway, Harry replied darkly. Ginny slid into the seat beside him. I might have a solution for your magical overload problem, she said without preamble. Luna told me about this meditation technique her father uses to organize his thoughts when researching Crumplehorn Snorkax. It actually sounds pretty legitimate, magical taxonomy stuff aside. Harry raised an eyebrow. You think meditation will help? It's worth a try, isn't it? Better than walking around with your head about to explode. Ginny bumped her shoulder against his. Besides, if you're going to be throwing around thousand-year-old spells, you should probably have some way to control which ones pop up. She's right, Hermione agreed. Mental organization is crucial for complex magic. It's why occlumency is so important. The mention of occlumency made Harry wince, remembering his disastrous lessons with Snape last year. But maybe this would be different. After all, he wasn't fighting against someone else entering his mind, he was trying to organize what was already there. "All right," he said. "I'll try it." "Great." Ginny beamed. Room of requirement, after transfiguration. Harry nodded, then caught sight of Professor McGonagall approaching their table, her expression stern. "Mr. Potter," she said. "The headmaster asked me to inform you that certain Ministry personnel will be returning tomorrow for their discussion. Professor Dumbledore will be present, but he strongly suggests you prepare yourself." Her eyes flicked meaningfully to where the amulet lay hidden beneath his robes. "Yes, Professor," Harry said. "Thank you." As McGonagall walked away, Harry turned to his friends. "Looks like I'd better get a handle on this quickly." The room of requirement had transformed itself into a peaceful meditation space, simple cushions arranged on a polished wooden floor, softly glowing lanterns floating in the corners, and a small fountain burbling quietly against one wall. "This is perfect," Ginny said, settling cross-legged onto a cushion. "Okay, so the technique is pretty straightforward. You close your eyes, focus on your breathing, and then start sorting the knowledge into categories that make sense to you." Harry sat across from her, feeling awkward. "Just like that?" "Luna says to visualize some kind of storage system. Her dad uses a filing cabinet with different drawers. You could use whatever works, a library, a potion storeroom, anything organized." "Worth a shot," Harry muttered, closing his eyes. He focused on his breathing, trying to clear his mind the way Snape had tried to teach him last year. For several minutes, nothing happened except that he became acutely aware of Ginny's presence across from him, the subtle scent of her flowery shampoo, the soft sound of her breathing. "Try holding the amulet," Ginny suggested. "Maybe it'll help channel things." Harry pulled the amulet from beneath his shirt, clutching it in his palm. Immediately, he felt the familiar warmth spreading up his arm, but this time, instead of a chaotic rush of magical knowledge, he sensed a structure forming in his mind. "I see something," he said quietly. "It's like a massive tower, with different floors, and rooms within rooms." "That's good," Ginny encouraged. "Explore it." In his mind's eye, Harry moved through the tower, discovering that each floor seemed dedicated to different branches of magic, charms on one level, transfiguration on another, combat magic, healing, potions, and dozens more specialized categories he didn't even have names for. "It's organized by type," he murmured. "And then by purpose. And then by complexity." He navigated mentally to the combat magic floor, opening a door labeled Shields to find hundreds of variations on protective spells, each with its own signature and purpose. "I can actually see the spells," he continued, amazed. "They're like glowing scrolls or something. And when I focus on one, I understand it completely." "Can you try accessing a specific spell?" Ginny asked. "Something simple." Harry mentally browsed through the tower until he found a section on elemental magic. He selected a basic water conjuring spell, far more elegant than Aguamenti. Opening his eyes, he made a fluid gesture with his hand. A perfect sphere of water formed above his palm, hovering and rippling with rainbow hues where the light struck it. "That's beautiful," Ginny breathed. "And it's not overwhelming," Harry realized. "I chose this specific spell, nothing else." They spent the next hour practicing, with Harry learning to navigate his mental tower, selecting specific spells and controlling their execution. By the time they finished, Harry felt more centered than he had since finding the amulet. "This is brilliant, Ginny," he said as they packed up to leave. "I actually feel like I might not accidentally turn someone into a toad tomorrow." Ginny grinned. "I don't know, Malfoy might look better that way." Harry laughed, then impulsively reached out and squeezed her hand. "Seriously. Thank you." A slight blush colored Ginny's cheeks. "Anytime," she said softly. Their eyes met for a moment longer than strictly necessary before Harry reluctantly released her hand. "We should tell the others about this. Maybe tonight we can all meet here for some proper practice." Ginny nodded. "I'll let Dean know I can't make our study date." Harry felt an unexpected twinge at the mention of Dean, but pushed it aside. Now wasn't the time for that kind of distraction. That evening, Harry led Ron, Hermione, and Ginny through the mental organization technique. The room had transformed again, this time into a perfect training space with practice dummies, cushioned floors, and even a small library corner where Hermione immediately gravitated. "The key," Harry explained after everyone had settled, "is having a system that makes sense to you. The tower works for me, but you might visualize something different." "What exactly are we organizing?" Ron asked. "We don't have ancient magical knowledge pouring into our brains." "No, but having a mental system helps with spell selection and control," Hermione explained from her reading nook. "Advanced wizards do this naturally. It's why Dumbledore can cast so effortlessly in duels, he's not scrambling to remember incantations or wand movements." "Exactly," Harry agreed. "And I think you guys should start learning some of these spells too. Nothing crazy powerful yet, but the basic versions of some of Merlin's magic. You never know when we might need them." "You think we could actually cast Merlin's spells?" Ron looked skeptical. Harry nodded. "Most of them, yeah. They're just spells, advanced and forgotten ones, but still just magic. You don't need to be his descendant to use them once you know how they work." For the next 2 hours, Harry guided them through several practical defensive spells, a silent disillusionment variant that worked better than invisibility cloaks, a personal shield that could be maintained while casting other spells, and a detection charm that revealed hidden magical objects. Ron, to everyone's surprise, took to the strategic applications immediately. "We need categories," he said excitedly. "Like, emergency spells everyone should master first, then specialized ones based on our strengths." Harry grinned. "That's actually brilliant, Ron." "What?" Ron looked defensive. "I can have good ideas sometimes." "No, really," Harry insisted. "That's exactly what we need. A system for prioritizing which spells to learn." Ron's ears reddened with pleasure. "Well, I was thinking, Hermione's brilliant with complex magic, so she could focus on the trickier stuff. I'm better at practical applications, and Ginny's got raw power for the more intense spells." "This is exactly how the Order should be operating," Hermione said thoughtfully. "Specialized magical training rather than just general defense." "Speaking of the Order," Ginny interjected, "should we tell them about all this? Lupin or Moody might be able to help." Harry hesitated. "Dumbledore knows, and I think for now, that's enough. The more people who know, the more likely Voldemort finds out." He unconsciously touched the amulet through his shirt. "Besides, I'm not sure how they'd react to me suddenly being Merlin's heir. It might just complicate things." "Fair point," Ron conceded. "Better to get a handle on it first." They continued practicing until well past curfew, making their way back to Gryffindor Tower under Harry's invisibility cloak and one of Merlin's stealth enchantments that muffled their footsteps completely. "Same time tomorrow?" Harry asked as they reached the portrait hole. The others nodded, and for the first time since discovering his inheritance, Harry felt a sense of control rather than chaos. Maybe, just maybe, they could turn this unexpected development into an advantage. The next morning, Harry awoke to find an official ministry scroll waiting on his bedside table. Unrolling it, he read, "Mr. Potter, your presence is requested in the headmaster's office at 10 a.m. to discuss matters of magical security. Representatives of the Department of Mysteries will be present. This is a formal inquiry under Section 7 of the Magical Security Act." "Daria Winchcombe, Senior, Unspeakable Department of Mysteries, what's that?" Ron asked, peering over Harry's shoulder. "Ministry summons," Harry replied grimly. "Looks like I've got a meeting in an hour." Want us to come with you? Harry shook his head. Probably best if I handle this alone. Besides, Dumbledore will be there. He dressed quickly, trying to organize his thoughts. Thanks to the meditation practice, the chaotic flood of magical knowledge had settled into manageable sections in his mental tower. Now he just needed to keep calm and not accidentally reveal anything about Merlin's chamber or the full extent of what he'd inherited. Outside the Great Hall, he nearly collided with Draco Malfoy, who was walking alone for once, without Crabbe and Goyle flanking him. "Watch it, Potter," Malfoy sneered, but there was something off about his tone. The usual venom was diluted, replaced by what almost seemed like wary curiosity. "Sorry," Harry muttered automatically, then noticed dark circles under Malfoy's eyes and an uncharacteristic pallor to his complexion. "You all right, Malfoy? You look terrible." Something flashed across Draco's face, surprise, perhaps, at the genuine question. "Mind your own business, Potter," he snapped, but again, the hostility felt forced. Before Harry could respond, Malfoy glanced at the Ministry scroll in Harry's hand. "More trouble with the Ministry? Your life's just one crisis after another, isn't it?" There was an odd note in his voice, almost like envy. "Something like that," Harry replied cautiously. Malfoy hesitated, seeming on the verge of saying something else, but then simply pushed past Harry and continued down the corridor. Harry watched him go, remembering the sickly green aura he'd seen surrounding Draco. Something was definitely off with Malfoy this year, something beyond their usual animosity. Making a mental note to keep a closer eye on him, Harry headed for the headmaster's office. "Mr. Potter." Madam Winchcombe's cool greeting set the tone as Harry entered Dumbledore's office. She sat beside a thin wizard with a monocle and a younger witch with intricate tattoos visible at her wrists. Dumbledore himself was behind his desk, his expression pleasant but his eyes watchful. "Thank you for joining us, Harry," Dumbledore said warmly. "Please, have a seat." Harry sat in the chair beside Dumbledore, facing the three Ministry officials across the desk. "We'll get straight to the point," Winchcombe said, adjusting her rectangular glasses. "Our instruments at the Department of Mysteries have detected anomalous magical signatures emanating from Hogwarts over the past 2 weeks. Specifically, from you, Mr. Potter." Harry kept his face neutral. "What kind of anomalies?" The tattooed witch spoke up. "Magical frequencies consistent with pre-Founders era spellcraft. Ancient magic that hasn't been recorded in active use for centuries." She leaned forward slightly. "Magic that isn't taught at Hogwarts or any modern institution." "I've been practicing," Harry said carefully. "After what happened at the Department of Mysteries last June, I thought it was important to expand my magical knowledge." "Practicing what, exactly?" Winchcombe pressed. "And from what sources?" Harry glanced at Dumbledore, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod. "I found some old books in Sirius Black's house," Harry said, sticking as close to the truth as possible. "My godfather left me everything, including his family library. There were some interesting spells there I've been trying out." The wizard with the monocle sniffed disapprovingly. "The Black family library is well known to contain questionable magical texts, Headmaster. I'm surprised you would allow a student access to such material." "Harry is quite capable of distinguishing between knowledge and its application, unspeakable croaker," Dumbledore replied mildly. "And as he correctly noted, those materials are legally his property." "Nevertheless," Winchcombe interjected, "the particular magical signatures we've detected go well beyond what even the Black Library would contain. We're talking about magic that predates the Ministry itself." "Is that illegal?" Harry asked directly. Winchcombe's lips thinned. "Not illegal, precisely. But unusual enough to warrant investigation, especially given your history." "My history of telling the truth when the Ministry refused to believe it?" Harry couldn't keep the edge from his voice. The tattooed witch, who hadn't introduced herself, spoke again. "Mr. Potter, we're not here to accuse you of anything. We're here because ancient magic can be volatile and dangerous, even to the caster. And because such magic emerging now, with you-know-who's return, raises certain security concerns. I'm not using dark magic, Harry said firmly. No one suggested you were, Winchcombe replied. But there are other classifications beyond dark and light that concern the Department of Mysteries. Primordial magic. Elemental bindings. Soul-resonant enchantments. Her gaze sharpened. Blood magic. Harry felt a chill. She was getting uncomfortably close to the truth about Merlin's inheritance. Dumbledore cleared his throat. I believe, Madam Winchcombe, that your department sensors may be detecting residual effects from the protection Lily Potter placed upon her son. As Voldemort, the Ministry officials flinched, has returned in a body created using Harry's blood, certain ancient magical resonances may have been activated. It was a clever redirection, and Harry tried not to look too relieved as Winchcombe considered this. Possible, she conceded reluctantly. But that doesn't explain the active spellcasting our sensors detected. As Harry mentioned, he has been practicing more advanced magic, Dumbledore said. With my encouragement, I might add. Given the unique connection between Harry and Voldemort, I believe it prudent for him to expand his magical repertoire beyond the standard curriculum. The three unspeakables exchanged glances. We would like to observe Mr. Potter performing some of this, advanced magic, the monocled wizard said finally. For security purposes. Harry tensed, but Dumbledore's hand moved slightly in a calming gesture. I believe that can be arranged, the headmaster said. Though I would insist on being present, as Harry's magical guardian. Winchcombe nodded curtly. Acceptable. Tomorrow afternoon, then. I have classes, Harry objected. This is a matter of magical security, Mr. Potter, Winchcombe replied coldly. Surely your charms lesson can wait. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, Dumbledore interjected smoothly. The practice field near the Quidditch pitch should provide adequate space and privacy. The meeting concluded shortly thereafter, with the unspeakables departing through Dumbledore's flue. Once they were gone, Harry slumped in his chair. That could have gone worse, he muttered. Indeed. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled briefly. Though I suspect tomorrow's demonstration will prove interesting. What should I show them? I can't exactly reveal Merlin's most powerful spells. I would suggest a careful selection, Dumbledore replied thoughtfully. Impressive enough to satisfy their curiosity, but nothing that would reveal the true extent of your inheritance. Perhaps some lesser-known but historically documented spells that could plausibly have come from the Black Library. Harry nodded. I think I can manage that. There's a whole section in the tower, in my mental organization, of spells that were once common but fell out of use. Excellent. Dumbledore seemed pleased by the mention of Harry's mental system. And how are you finding your inheritance otherwise? Managing the influx of knowledge? Better now, Harry admitted. I've worked out a way to organize it all, so it's not overwhelming me anymore. Very good. Dumbledore rose, signaling the end of their conversation. I suggest you spend today preparing for tomorrow's demonstration. And Harry? His expression grew more serious. Be cautious around the Ministry officials. Not all of them share Madam Winchcombe's relatively straightforward approach. Harry nodded, recognizing the warning. I will, Professor. As he left Dumbledore's office, Harry felt a flicker of unease. The Ministry's interest complicated matters, especially with everything else happening. He needed to accelerate their training sessions, and keep a closer watch on Malfoy. Something told him things were going to start moving very quickly. The afternoon found Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Ginny in the room of requirement again, preparing for the next day's Ministry demonstration. You need spells that are impressive but not too obscure, Hermione advised, flipping through a heavy tome titled Magical Techniques of the Early Medieval Period. Things they might believe you found in old books. What about that shield variation you did in Charms? Ron suggested. McGonagall said that was last used in the 1600s, so it's old but not ancient. Harry nodded, mentally browsing his tower for suitable spells. I was thinking of a few weather manipulation charms that were common in the 16th century. Nothing too dramatic, but visually impressive. Smart, Ginny agreed. Weather magic is showy but not threatening. They spent the next hour compiling a list of spells that would satisfy the ministry without revealing too much. Harry practiced each one, focusing on making them look good but keeping their power restrained. What about Malfoy? Harry asked during a break. I still think he's up to something. He has been acting strange, Hermione admitted. I noticed he's missing meals sometimes, and he's not bullying first years nearly as much as usual. High praise, Ron snorted. He's only moderately evil this year. I'm serious, Harry insisted. And there's that green aura I saw. Something's not right with him. Ginny looked thoughtful. Could you use one of Merlin's spells to find out? Something discreet. Harry considered this, mentally searching through his knowledge. There's a tracking enchantment that might work. It's subtle, creates a thin magical thread between the caster and the target. I'd be able to sense Malfoy's general location and emotional state without him knowing. That doesn't sound entirely ethical, Hermione said dubiously. Neither does whatever he's planning, Harry countered. Remember, his father's a Death Eater. If Malfoy's involved in something dangerous. Harry's right, Ron said. Better to know than be caught off guard. Hermione sighed. Fine. But be careful. If he notices, it could make things worse. Harry nodded, then closed his eyes and focused on the spell, visualizing Draco Malfoy clearly in his mind. Sequor vestigium, he whispered, making a complex gesture with his wand. A thin silver thread materialized briefly before vanishing, and Harry felt a new awareness settle into his consciousness, a faint pull toward wherever Malfoy currently was. It worked, he said, opening his eyes. He's in the Slytherin common room right now. And he's anxious about something. Creepy, Ron muttered. Useful, Harry corrected. Now I'll know if he's up to something suspicious. Before they could discuss it further, the door to the room of requirement opened, which should have been impossible while they were using it. Everyone spun around, wands raised, as a tall, regal-looking witch in midnight blue robes stepped inside. Mr. Potter, she said, her voice carrying a slight accent Harry couldn't place. I apologize for the intrusion, but I believe we need to speak urgently. Who are you? Harry demanded, not lowering his wand. And how did you get in here? The witch smiled slightly. My name is Elaine Corbenic. As for how I entered, let's just say the room of requirement recognizes certain, ancient affiliations. She produced a small token from her pocket, a silver disc engraved with symbols strikingly similar to those on Harry's amulet. Harry felt the amulet warm against his chest in response. You're with Merlin, he said, not a question. In a manner of speaking. Elaine inclined her head. I represent the Keepers of Albian, a society dedicated to preserving and protecting Merlin's legacy through the centuries. We've been waiting for the true heir to awaken. Prove it, Hermione challenged, her wand still raised. Elaine didn't seem offended. A reasonable request. She turned to Harry. The amulet you wear is called the Pendant of Emeries. It contains not only access to Merlin's magical knowledge but also serves as a key to his various sanctums throughout Britain. The chamber you discovered here at Hogwarts is only one of 7 such places. Harry felt the truth of her words resonate with knowledge he hadn't yet fully accessed. There are others. Indeed. The most significant being the great repository beneath Glastonbury Tor. Elaine's eyes sparkled with genuine excitement. We've maintained the protections around these sites for generations, waiting for the heir who could truly access them. And you just happen to show up now? Ron asked skeptically. We've been watching Hogwarts since the unusual magical signatures began appearing 2 weeks ago, Elaine explained. When the Ministry sent unspeakables, we knew we needed to make contact quickly. Her expression grew more serious. Particularly given recent activities by those who would misuse Merlin's legacy. Voldemort, Harry guessed. Elaine nodded. Among others. The balance is shifting, Mr. Potter. Your awakening has triggered responses in the magical world. Some of them potentially dangerous. Morgan Le Fay's heir, Harry said quietly. You know of this? Elaine looked surprised. Merlin warned me it might happen. Harry finally lowered his wand, though Ron and Hermione kept theirs ready. He said my awakening could trigger theirs. He was correct. We've detected signs that Morgan's bloodline has indeed been activated. Elaine glanced around at the four of them. I know this is sudden, but the Keepers of Albion can offer guidance and protection. Merlin's magic is incredible, but without proper training in its applications, it can be overwhelming or even dangerous. I'm doing fine, Harry said, perhaps a bit defensively. Elaine smiled gently. Your mental organization technique is impressive for a beginner, but there are deeper levels to this inheritance. Magical resonances that affect not just spells but the very fabric of reality around you. Harry hesitated, glancing at his friends. How do we know we can trust you? Ginny asked bluntly. A fair question. Elaine produced a sealed letter from her robes. Perhaps this will help. From Albus Dumbledore. Harry took the letter cautiously, examining the seal. It appeared genuine. He broke it open and read quickly, then looked up in surprise. Dumbledore knows about you. About the Keepers. We've collaborated occasionally over the years, though we tend to operate independently of wizarding governments and institutions. Elaine looked around the room of requirement with appreciation. This space is excellent for training, by the way. You've chosen well. So what exactly are you offering? Hermione asked, finally lowering her wand. Guidance. Historical context. And most importantly, warning. Elaine's expression turned grave. Morgan Le Fay's magic was powerful but fundamentally different from Merlin's. Where his sought harmony with natural forces, hers sought dominance over them. Both approaches have their place, but in the wrong hands, either could be catastrophic. And you think Morgan's heir is at Hogwarts? Harry asked. We believe so. The resonance patterns suggest proximity to you, which makes sense. Ancient magics often seek balance through proximity. She glanced at her timepiece. I can't stay long this visit, the Ministry has eyes on Hogwarts, but I wanted to establish contact and give you this. She handed Harry a small, ornate key. For the second chamber. It's located in what Muggles now call Puzzlewood, in the Forest of Dean. When you're ready to expand your training, go there. Why not just train me here? Harry asked, pocketing the key. Because some knowledge is too sensitive for Hogwarts walls, even with this room's protections. Elaine moved toward the door. I'll return in 3 days' time, after your Ministry demonstration. Be careful, Mr. Potter. Show them enough to satisfy their curiosity, but nothing that reveals the true extent of what you're becoming. With that cryptic advice, she slipped out, leaving the four friends staring after her. Well, Ron said after a moment, that wasn't weird at all. Do you think we can trust her? Hermione asked Harry. Harry looked down at Dumbledore's letter again. It seemed authentic, and the headmaster vouched for Elaine as a valuable ally. I think so. And honestly, I could use some guidance from people who understand this inheritance better. The Keepers of Albion, Ginny mused. I've never heard of them. That's probably by design, Hermione pointed out. If they've been protecting Merlin's legacy for centuries, they'd want to stay hidden. Harry nodded, mind racing. Between the Ministry demonstration tomorrow and now this new connection to Merlin's followers, things were accelerating rapidly. And somewhere in the castle, if Elaine was right, Morgan Le Fay's heir was awakening to their own inheritance. We should get back, he said finally. I need to be ready for tomorrow. As they left the room of requirement, Harry felt the tracking spell tug at his awareness. Malfoy was on the move, heading up from the dungeons with a sense of nervous purpose. Interesting timing. The next afternoon found Harry standing on the Quidditch practice field, facing the three Ministry Unspeakables with Dumbledore beside him. A small crowd had gathered at a distance, students pretending to study while watching the proceedings with undisguised curiosity. "Whenever you're ready, Mr. Potter," Madam Winchcombe said crisply, a magical measuring device hovering beside her. Harry took a deep breath, centering himself. He'd prepared carefully, selecting spells that were impressive but historically documented. Nothing that would immediately scream Merlin's heir. He began with a series of elemental transformations, turning a pitcher of water into a miniature storm cloud, then compressing it into a perfect sphere of ice, then transmuting that into a column of dancing flame, all with precise wand work and clearly audible incantations. The tattooed witch, who had introduced herself as Unspeakable Diaz, nodded approvingly, while the monocled croaker made notes on a floating parchment. Next, Harry demonstrated the shield variation he'd accidentally used in charms, deliberately making the incantation more complex than necessary to suggest he'd learned it rather than inherited it. "Impressive control," Diaz commented. "This particular shield variant fell out of common usage around 1700, if I'm not mistaken." 1687, Croaker corrected pedantically. "Following the Accords of Warsaw." Winchcombe seemed less impressed. "These are all documented spells, Mr. Potter. Unusual for a 16-year-old to master, certainly, but nothing that explains the anomalous readings we detected." Harry hesitated, then decided to show them something slightly more advanced, still within the realm of historically documented magic, but rare enough to satisfy them. "There's one more spell I've been practicing," he said. "It's a bit more complicated." Raising his wand, Harry began a complex series of movements while chanting in Latin. The air around him shimmered, and slowly, a translucent dome formed over the entire practice field, extending about 30 feet in every direction. Within the dome, small points of light appeared, representing every magical signature present, brighter spots for the witches and wizards, dimmer ones for enchanted objects like Winchcombe's measuring device. "A traditional detection sphere," Croaker breathed, clearly impressed despite himself. "I haven't seen one properly cast in decades." "The Black Family Grimoire?" Winchcombe asked, eyeing Harry. Harry nodded, letting the dome dissolve. "From the 1760s section. It took weeks to figure out the proper cadence for the incantation." This was precisely the kind of half-truth he prepared. The spell was indeed documented in the 18th century, though Harry had accessed it through Merlin's knowledge rather than a Black Family book. The three Unspeakables conferred briefly, then Winchcombe turned back to Harry. "Your magical ability is clearly exceptional, Mr. Potter, but these demonstrations align with known, documented magic. Our instruments, however, detected something more fundamental." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you certain there's nothing else you wish to share with the department?" Harry met her gaze steadily. "I'm just trying to prepare myself, Madam Winchcombe. With Voldemort after me, I can't afford to rely only on school-level spells." At the mention of Voldemort, Croaker flinched visibly. "Very well," Winchcombe said after a moment. "For now, we'll accept your explanation. But the department will be monitoring magical activity at Hogwarts closely. Any further anomalies will result in a more thorough investigation." The implied threat wasn't subtle. Harry nodded curtly, relieved when Dumbledore stepped forward to conclude the meeting. "I believe we've taken enough of Mr. Potter's time," the headmaster said pleasantly but firmly. "Unless there are specific concerns about the safety of the school or its students." Winchcombe hesitated, then shook her head. "Not at present, headmaster. We'll be in touch if that changes." As the ministry officials packed up their equipment, Harry noticed Draco Malfoy watching from the edge of the gathered students, his expression unreadable. The tracking spell told Harry that Draco was feeling a mixture of fear and recognition. As if something about Harry's demonstration had confirmed a suspicion. "Interesting. A skillful performance, Harry, Dumbledore murmured as they watched the unspeakables depart. You've bought yourself some time, though I doubt Madam Winchcombe is entirely convinced. Do you think they know about Merlin? Harry asked quietly. The Department of Mysteries has studied magical bloodlines for centuries, Dumbledore replied. They may suspect, but suspicion is not confirmation. His blue eyes twinkled. I see you've made contact with the keepers of Albian. Harry nodded. Elaine Corbenic. She seemed to know a lot about the inheritance. The keepers have preserved much of Merlin's knowledge that would otherwise have been lost to time, Dumbledore acknowledged. They can be valuable allies, though they have their own agenda, as all organizations do. She mentioned Morgan Le Fay's heir being at Hogwarts, Harry said. Do you think that's true? Dumbledore's expression grew thoughtful. It would follow the pattern of magical balance. And there have been indications of another ancient awakening. He glanced meaningfully across the field to where Malfoy was now walking back toward the castle. You think it's Malfoy? Harry hadn't expected confirmation of his suspicions from Dumbledore himself. I think nothing is certain, Dumbledore replied diplomatically. But I would suggest keeping an open mind about Mr. Malfoy. Ancient bloodlines rarely follow our modern expectations or prejudices. Before Harry could press further, Ron, Hermione, and Ginny approached, having watched the demonstration from a discreet distance. That went well, Hermione said. They seemed satisfied. For now, Harry agreed. But Winchcombe is still suspicious. Did you notice Malfoy watching? Ron asked. Looked like he was taking mental notes or something. I noticed, Harry confirmed, feeling the tracking spell's subtle tug. And I think Professor Dumbledore might be right about him. Right about what? Ginny asked. Harry hesitated, then decided his friends deserved the whole truth. I think Malfoy might be Morgan Le Fay's heir. Later that evening, Harry found himself drawn to the library, searching for information about Morgan Le Fay beyond the basic mentions in History of Magic. If Malfoy really was her heir, Harry needed to understand what they might be dealing with. In a dusty corner of the historical section, he found what he was looking for, a weathered tome titled The Mage Wars, Merlin, Morgan, and the Battle for Magical Britain. As he reached for it, another hand closed around the spine at the same time. Sorry, Harry began, then stopped short when he saw who it was. Malfoy. Draco looked equally surprised, though he recovered quickly, his usual sneer sliding into place. Looking for some light reading, Potter? This might be a bit advanced for you. Instead of rising to the bait, Harry studied Draco more carefully, noting again the dark circles under his eyes and the way his robes seemed to hang more loosely than before. You look like you haven't slept in weeks, Malfoy. Something flashed across Draco's face, surprise at the direct observation, perhaps, or irritation at the accuracy. What's it to you? Just an observation. Harry didn't release the book. Interesting choice of reading material. Draco's eyes narrowed. Ancient history interests me. Not that it's any of your business. Morgan Le Fay specifically. A muscle twitched in Draco's jaw. Among others. They stood at an impasse, both holding the book, both clearly unwilling to back down. Around them, the library was quiet, with few students around at this hour. What was that magic today? Draco asked suddenly, his voice low enough that only Harry could hear. With the Ministry people. Just some old spells I've been studying, Harry replied carefully. Bullshit. The crude word sounded strange in Draco's cultured drawl. That wasn't just old magic. It was different. His eyes dropped briefly to Harry's chest, where the amulet lay hidden beneath his robes. Something's happened to you, hasn't it? Something's changed. Harry considered his options. Direct confrontation clearly wasn't working with Malfoy, and if he really was Morgan's heir, antagonizing him might be dangerous. Perhaps a different approach. Tell you what, Harry said, releasing the book. It's all yours. But if you want to talk about what's really going on, with both of us, find me tomorrow after potions. Draco blinked, clearly caught off guard by the offer. He took the book, clutching it almost protectively. Why would I want to talk to you, Potter? Because you're not sleeping, Harry said simply. Because you're researching Morgan Le Fay. And because whatever's happening to you, I might understand better than you think. Before Draco could respond, Harry turned and walked away, feeling the other boy's eyes on his back. The tracking spell told him Draco's emotional state had shifted from defensive wariness to confused curiosity, and a threat of something that felt almost like hope. Harry smiled slightly to himself. It wasn't much, but it was a start. You did what? Ron looked aghast when Harry explained his library encounter with Malfoy later in the Gryffindor common room. Have you gone mental? He'll probably just tell his Death Eater pals all about it. I don't think so, Harry said, keeping his voice low to avoid being overheard. You didn't see his face, Ron. He's scared. Something's happening to him that he doesn't understand, and his usual support system isn't helping. So you're going to what, adopt him? Ron's expression was a mixture of disbelief and disgust. He's still Malfoy. He's still the git who's made our lives miserable for 5 years. I'm not saying we should trust him, Harry clarified. I'm saying we should find out what's going on. If he really is Morgan's heir, we need to know what he's capable of. Harry's right, Hermione said thoughtfully. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer, as the saying goes. And if Morgan and Merlin were such opposites, maybe their heirs don't have to be enemies, Ginny added. Maybe there's a way to break the cycle. Ron looked unconvinced but didn't argue further. Just be careful, all right? Malfoy's always got an angle. Trust me, Harry said, I'll be on my guard. The conversation shifted to their plans for the next day. With the ministry demonstration behind them, Harry was eager to explore more of Merlin's magic, particularly the combat spells they might need if Voldemort made another move. I've been thinking about Ron's categorization idea, Hermione said, spreading a parchment on the table between them. I've drafted a system based on magical function and difficulty. The parchment contained an elaborate chart dividing spells into primary categories: defense, attack, utility, healing, detection, and transportation, with subcategories beneath each and difficulty ratings from 1 to 5. This is brilliant, Hermione, Harry said, genuinely impressed. Ron's idea, she reminded him with a small smile in Ron's direction, causing him to flush with pleasure. If we each focus on different areas, we can cover more ground, Ginny suggested. I'm particularly interested in the attack spells, personally. Why am I not surprised? Ron teased, dodging her half-hearted swat. As they continued planning their training schedule, Harry felt a sudden, sharp tug from the tracking spell. Malfoy was moving, not toward the Slytherin dungeons, but up through the castle, his emotional state a confusing mixture of determination and dread. I need to check something, Harry said abruptly, standing. I'll be back in a bit. Malfoy? Hermione guessed shrewdly. Harry nodded. He's heading somewhere, and he's seriously worked up about it. Want backup? Ron offered, reaching for his wand. No, I'll be faster alone. I'll take the invisibility cloak. Harry hurried up to the dormitory, retrieved the cloak from his trunk, and slipped back down, waving briefly to his friends before climbing through the portrait hole. Under the cloak's concealment, Harry followed the tracking spell's pull, moving swiftly through the castle corridors. Malfoy seemed to be heading toward the 7th floor, toward the room of requirement. Harry's suspicion deepened. What would Malfoy want with the room of requirement unless he was hiding something? Approaching cautiously, Harry saw Draco pacing in front of the blank wall, his face contorted with concentration. After his third pass, a door materialized, and Draco quickly slipped inside. Harry hesitated. Should he follow immediately or wait to see what happened? The tracking spell indicated Malfoy's anxiety had peaked just before entering the room, then settled into grim determination once inside. Decision made, Harry waited a full minute before approaching the wall himself. He paced 3 times, thinking, I need to see what Draco Malfoy is hiding. A door appeared, smaller than the one Draco had used. Harry opened it carefully and slipped inside, still beneath his cloak. The room had transformed into something vast and cathedral-like, a massive chamber filled with towering piles of junk. Furniture, books, instruments, clothing, and thousands of other objects created a labyrinthine space stretching farther than Harry could see. The tracking spell pulled him deeper into the maze of forgotten items. Moving silently, Harry navigated through narrow pathways between teetering columns of discarded possessions until he heard Malfoy's voice, muttering angrily to himself. Harry peered around a massive broken wardrobe and saw Draco standing before a large cabinet, his wand moving in complex patterns over its surface. A book, the very one from the library about Morgan and Merlin, lay open at his feet. Come on, work, Draco hissed, his voice strained. You have to work. As Harry watched, the cabinet briefly glowed with a sickly green light, the same color as the aura he'd seen around Malfoy, before fading back to normal. Draco slammed his fist against it in frustration. I can't fail, he whispered, and Harry was shocked to see tears streaking the Slytherin's pale face. He'll kill them. He'll kill me. Harry stepped back, processing what he was seeing. Whatever Malfoy was doing, it wasn't by choice, he was terrified. And based on the Draco mentioned, Voldemort was somehow involved. But before Harry could retreat, his foot caught on something that clattered loudly in the cavernous space. Draco whirled around, wand raised. Who's there? He demanded, his voice cracking. Hominum revelio. A wave of magic swept over Harry, and he knew the spell had revealed his presence despite the cloak. Making a split-second decision, he pulled off the invisibility cloak, stepping into view with his empty hands raised. Just me, Malfoy. Draco's face contorted with fury. Potter. Spying again. Stupefy. Harry reacted instinctively, drawing on Merlin's knowledge. Without his wand, he made a circular gesture with his right hand that absorbed Draco's spell into a swirling vortex of energy, then dissipated it harmlessly. Draco froze, his eyes widening. What the? I didn't come to fight, Harry said quickly. And I think we both have questions for each other. You're trespassing, Draco spat, though he didn't cast another spell. Get out before I really hurt you. Like you're hurting yourself? Harry nodded toward the cabinet. Whatever Voldemort's making you do, it's destroying you, Malfoy. I can see it. Draco flinched at Voldemort's name, his wand hand trembling slightly. You know nothing, Potter. I know you didn't choose this, Harry said quietly. I know you're scared. And I know something's happening to you magically that you don't understand. The last point hit home. Draco's mask slipped for a moment, revealing raw vulnerability beneath. How could you possibly? Because something's happening to me too, Harry interrupted. He reached beneath his robes and pulled out the amulet, letting it glow visibly in the dim light of the room. Something ancient. Something to do with bloodlines and inheritance. Draco stared at the amulet, transfixed. Slowly, almost unconsciously, he reached into his own robes and withdrew a small object that gleamed darkly, a ring set with a black stone etched with a spiral pattern. It pulsed with the same sickly green energy Harry had seen in his aura. It started 2 weeks ago, Draco said, his voice barely above a whisper. I found this among my mother's things when I went home for the weekend. It called to me somehow. And then the dreams started, Harry guessed. Dreams about a woman with dark hair and incredible power. Draco's head snapped up, his eyes wide. How did you? Because I had similar dreams about Merlin. Harry took a cautious step forward. Your ring belonged to Morgan Le Fay. My amulet belonged to Merlin. We're their last living descendants, Malfoy. That's impossible, Draco breathed, but his expression said he already knew it was true. Is it? You felt the change in your magic. Spells working differently. Knowledge you shouldn't have. Harry gestured at the book on the floor. That's why you were researching her. Draco's shoulders slumped slightly, his wand lowering a fraction. I thought I was going mad. With everything else happening. His eyes darted to the cabinet, then back to Harry. Why are you telling me this? We're enemies. Merlin and Morgan were rivals, but they weren't always enemies, Harry said, drawing on knowledge that surfaced from his inheritance. They respected each other. Understood each other in ways no one else could. And look how that ended, Draco said bitterly. With a magical war that nearly destroyed Britain. It doesn't have to be that way for us, Harry insisted. Whatever Voldemort's making you do, whatever this cabinet is, there are other options, Malfoy. For a moment, something like hope flickered across Draco's face, but it quickly hardened into suspicion. Right. I'll just switch sides, shall I? Become Dumbledore's pet like you? The Dark Lord would kill my parents before I even finished explaining. Then let us help protect them, Harry urged. Dumbledore can't even protect himself, Draco snapped. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Potter. He gestured at the cabinet. This is nothing compared to what's coming. Before Harry could respond, a surge of magic rippled through the room, not from either of them, but from somewhere deep in the castle. Both boys felt it, their heads turning simultaneously toward the sensation. What was that? Draco asked, momentarily forgetting their confrontation. Harry concentrated, reaching out with his enhanced magical senses. Something's happening in Hogsmeade, he said, suddenly certain. Something bad. As if confirming his words, distant alarms began to sound throughout the castle. Dumbledore's voice, magically amplified, echoed through the corridors. All students returned to their houses immediately. Prefects, conduct headcounts. This is not a drill. Draco's face paled further. It's them, he whispered. Death Eaters. Harry's mind raced. Is this cabinet? No. Draco looked genuinely horrified. It's not ready yet. This is something else. His eyes met Harry's, conflict evident in them. Potter, whatever he was about to say was cut off as an enormous explosion rocked the castle, so powerful it shook dust from the towering piles of junk around them. I have to go, Harry said urgently, already moving toward the exit. We'll finish this later. But Malfoy, he paused, looking back. Whatever's happening to you with Morgan's magic, be careful with it. It's powerful but dangerous. Same goes for you, Potter, Draco replied, an odd note of something almost like concern in his voice. Harry nodded once, then sprinted from the room, pulling the invisibility cloak back over himself as he ran. Behind him, he felt Draco's presence through the tracking spell, not following but not returning to his task with the cabinet either. The Slytherin seemed frozen in indecision, torn between multiple competing loyalties. But Harry couldn't worry about that now. Something was attacking Hogsmeade, and based on the magical signature he'd felt, it wasn't just ordinary Death Eaters. There was ancient magic at work, the kind that might require Merlin's heir to counter. Harry raced through chaos-filled corridors, students streaming toward their dormitories while prefects shouted instructions. He spotted Ron, Hermione, and Ginny fighting against the current, clearly looking for him. Here, he called, pulling them into an alcove and removing the cloak. Death Eaters in Hogsmeade. We know, Hermione said grimly. The alarm went up about 5 minutes ago. Professor McGonagall's organizing the teachers to go help. Did you find Malfoy? Ron asked. Yes, and it's complicated, Harry said quickly. He is Morgan's heir, but he's also being forced to do something for Voldemort, something involving a cabinet in the Room of Requirement. What kind of cabinet? Hermione asked sharply. Big, black, ornate. He was trying to fix it, but it didn't seem to be working properly. Hermione's eyes widened. It could be a vanishing cabinet. They were used during the First War as escape routes, but they could also serve as passages between paired cabinets. A way into Hogwarts, Ginny realized. But if it's not working yet, then this attack is something else, Harry finished. And we need to help. Ron looked skeptical. McGonagall told everyone to stay put. When have we ever listened to that? Harry countered. Besides, they don't know what they might be facing. If there's ancient magic involved, I might be able to help in ways they can't. Another explosion sounded, closer this time, followed by screams from the direction of Hogsmeade. Fine, Ron conceded. But we go together, and we stay smart about it. Harry nodded, then pulled out the Marauder's map. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. The map revealed the castle in chaos, with teachers congregating at the main entrance while students flowed toward their dormitories. Looks like they're gathering in the entrance hall, Harry noted. If we hurry, we can join them before they head to Hogsmeade. The four of them moved quickly through the castle, using secret passages where possible to avoid the crowds of students. As they approached the entrance hall, they slowed, peering cautiously around a corner. Professor McGonagall stood at the center of a group of teachers, issuing rapid instructions. Phileas, take the east side of the village with Septima and Bathsheba. Pomona, you and Rolanda cover the west. Severus and I will approach from the north. The headmaster is already on site. What about the students? Professor Sprout asked worriedly. Mr. Filch and the prefects will ensure everyone remains in their dormitories, McGonagall replied. Now, quickly. Reports indicate at least a dozen Death Eaters, possibly more. As the teachers began to move out, Harry stepped forward. Professor McGonagall. She turned sharply. Potter. What are you? Never mind, get back to Gryffindor Tower immediately. Professor, I can help, Harry insisted. There's ancient magic at work, I can sense it. This isn't just a regular Death Eater attack. McGonagall's eyes narrowed. How could you possibly? He's right, Minerva, Professor Flitwick interjected, his normally cheerful face grave. The magical signature is unlike anything I've encountered in decades. Similar to what we observed from Mr. Potter recently. McGonagall hesitated, clearly torn between protecting her student and acknowledging the potential value of Harry's unexpected abilities. If there is ancient magic involved, Snape said silkily, surely the headmaster is better equipped to handle it than a 16-year-old student, regardless of his recent developments. I'm going whether you allow it or not, Professor, Harry said firmly. But I'd rather go with your knowledge and support. McGonagall's lips thinned into a familiar line of disapproval, but something in her eyes shifted. Very well, Potter. You may accompany us, but you will stay with me at all times and follow instructions immediately and without question. Is that clear? Yes, Professor, Harry agreed. And us? Ron asked, stepping forward with Hermione and Ginny. Absolutely not, McGonagall said firmly. Mr. Potter's special circumstances are the only reason I'm bending the rules at all. The rest of you will return to your dormitory. Harry shot his friends an apologetic look as McGonagall ushered him toward the door. I'll be careful, he promised. You'd better be, Ginny replied, her expression fierce. We'll be ready if you need backup. Harry nodded gratefully, then followed McGonagall and the other teachers out onto the grounds. Behind him, he sensed rather than saw his friends reluctantly heading back toward Gryffindor Tower, though he strongly suspected they wouldn't stay there long. As they hurried toward Hogsmeade, the evening sky was lit with flashes of spell fire, and smoke rose from several buildings in the village. McGonagall set a brisk pace, her wand already drawn. Potter, she said without breaking stride, I expect a full explanation of these special circumstances when this is over. Yes, Professor, Harry replied, his attention focused on the growing magical disturbance ahead. Something powerful and ancient was at work in Hogsmeade, something that felt disturbingly similar to the energy he'd sensed from Draco's ring. They reached the outskirts of the village to find chaos. Several shops were ablaze, villagers were running for cover, and in the main square, a pitched battle was underway. Dumbledore stood at the center, his wand moving with incredible speed as he dueled multiple Death Eaters simultaneously. But what caught Harry's attention was the figure standing slightly apart from the main battle, a tall, cloaked individual whose hands glowed with sickly green energy identical to what Harry had seen around Draco and his ring. Ancient magic, Morgan's magic. "Stay close, Potter," McGonagall ordered as the teachers spread out to engage the Death Eaters. She cast a powerful shield around both of them as spells began flying in their direction. But Harry's focus remained on the cloaked figure, who was now raising their hands toward the sky. The green energy spiraled upward, forming a vortex that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. "Professor," Harry said urgently, "that person, they're using ancient magic. The same kind I've been working with. If they complete whatever they're doing, I don't think normal shields will stop it." McGonagall followed his gaze, her expression hardening. "What are they attempting?" Harry reached into his mental tower, searching for comparable magic. "It looks like a major ward-breaking spell. They're trying to shatter Hogsmeade's protective enchantments, maybe as a test run for Hogwarts itself. Can you counter it?" McGonagall asked, abandoning any pretense that she didn't know about Harry's special abilities. Harry nodded, already drawing on Merlin's knowledge. "I think so, but I'll need to get closer." McGonagall's lips thinned. "Stay behind my shield. We'll approach together." They moved through the battle, McGonagall deflecting spells with remarkable skill as they made their way toward the mysterious figure. Harry could see Dumbledore noticing their movement, a flicker of concern crossing his face before he redoubled his efforts against the Death Eaters, clearly trying to draw attention away from Harry and McGonagall. As they drew closer, Harry could feel the ancient magic more intensely, raw, powerful, and fundamentally disruptive in a way modern magic wasn't. It sought to unravel rather than create, to dominate rather than harmonize. "Morgan's approach," Harry muttered, the knowledge surfacing naturally. "Bending reality to will rather than working with it." "What was that, Potter?" McGonagall asked sharply. "Nothing," Harry replied, concentrating on the counterspell he would need. "I'm ready when you are, Professor." They had reached a position about 20 feet from the cloaked figure, who remained focused on their spell, the green vortex now pulsing ominously above the village. Harry could feel the protective wards around Hogsmeade beginning to strain and crack under the assault. "Now, Potter," McGonagall commanded, strengthening her shield as she positioned herself between Harry and the main battle. Harry closed his eyes briefly, accessing the deepest part of his mental tower where Merlin's most fundamental magic resided. This wasn't about specific spells but about magical approach, harmony versus dominance, cooperation versus control. Raising his wand, Harry began a complex series of movements while speaking words in the ancient language he'd used to open Merlin's chamber. Blue energy, the same color as the amulet, flowed from his wand in his free hand, rising to meet the green vortex above. The cloaked figure faltered, finally sensing the countermagic. They turned sharply, hood falling back to reveal a woman Harry didn't recognize, middle-aged with striking features and eyes that glowed the same sickly green as her magic. "The air," she hissed, her voice carrying despite the chaos around them. "At last." Harry didn't respond, pouring his concentration into the counterspell. His blue energy wrapped around the green vortex, not fighting it directly but redirecting it, channeling it, working with its flow rather than against it. Where Morgan's approach sought to break, Merlin sought to transform. The woman snarled, increasing the power of her spell. The green vortex pulsed violently, sending shockwaves across the village that shattered windows and staggered even Dumbledore momentarily. "You don't even know what you are, boy," she called to Harry. "What you could be. You play with powers beyond your understanding." Harry felt the amulet grow hot against his chest, pulsing in time with his magic. Drawing on its strength, he pushed harder, his blue energy expanding to fully encompass the green vortex. "Neither do you," he replied steadily. "Or you'd know that force isn't always the answer." With a final surge of will, Harry completed the counterspell. Instead of simply dispelling the green vortex, his magic transformed it, the destructive energy converting into a cascade of harmless light that rained down over the village, actually strengthening the wards it had been meant to destroy. The woman staggered back, shock evident on her face. "Impossible," she whispered. Before she could recover, Dumbledore appeared beside her, his wand directed at her chest. "I believe that's quite enough, Madame Zabini." Harry blinked in surprise. "Zabini?" As in Blaise Zabini, the Slytherin in his year. The woman's face contorted with fury, but she was clearly outmatched with both Dumbledore and Harry opposing her. With a gesture of her hand, green fire erupted around her body. "This isn't over, heir of Merlin," she spat at Harry. "The balance will be restored." Then she vanished in a swirl of emerald flames, not apparition, but something older and more complex. "Filius. Secure the perimeter." Dumbledore called out, already moving to help the other teachers with the remaining Death Eaters, who were now retreating in the face of Zabini's disappearance. McGonagall turned to Harry, her expression a mixture of astonishment and concern. "Potter, what in Merlin's name?" She stopped, the irony of her phrasing suddenly apparent. "What exactly did you just do?" Harry leaned against a nearby wall, suddenly exhausted. The counterspell had taken more out of him than he'd expected. "I reversed her magic, Professor. Turned destruction into reinforcement." "I've never seen anything like it," McGonagall admitted. "Not in all my years." "It's Merlin's approach," Harry explained, too tired to maintain secrecy. "Working with magical forces rather than trying to dominate them." McGonagall's eyes widened. "Merlin's. Potter, are you saying, Harry?" Dumbledore approached quickly, the immediate battle apparently concluded. "Are you all right?" Harry nodded wearily. "Just tired, Professor." Understandable, after such an impressive display of ancient magic. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled despite the gravity of the situation. "I believe you've demonstrated rather conclusively that your recent studies have been productive." McGonagall looked between them. "Albus, you knew about this?" "I've been aware of Mr. Potter's heritage for some time now," Dumbledore acknowledged. "Though I admit, even I did not anticipate such a dramatic public revelation." "That was Blaise Zabini's mother, wasn't it?" Harry asked. "Is she, Morgan Le Fay's heir?" "No," Dumbledore replied. "Though she is connected to that bloodline through marriage. I suspect she was merely an acolyte, using knowledge provided by the true heir." Harry thought immediately of Draco and his ring. "So there's someone else controlling things?" "Most likely," Dumbledore agreed. "And I think, given tonight's events, it's time we had a more thorough discussion about both bloodlines and their implications." The sound of running footsteps interrupted them. Harry turned to see Ron, Hermione, and Ginny sprinting into the village, wands drawn. "Predictable," McGonagall muttered disapprovingly. "Harry!" Hermione called, reaching them first. "We saw the lights from the castle, that green vortex and then the blue energy." "Was that you?" "Mr. Weasley, Miss Granger, Miss Weasley," Dumbledore greeted them calmly. "While your concern for your friend is commendable, I must insist that we postpone further discussion until we've secured the village." "We can help," Ginny offered immediately. "Indeed you can," Dumbledore agreed, surprising everyone. "By escorting Mr. Potter back to the castle. The danger has passed for now, but he has expended considerable magical energy and should rest." Harry wanted to protest but found he could barely stand without the wall's support. The counterspell had drained him more thoroughly than he'd realized. "Come on, mate," Ron said, moving to Harry's side. "You look like you're about to fall over." As his friends helped him toward the path back to Hogwarts, Harry glanced over his shoulder at the village. The physical damage was significant, several buildings burned and others showing spell damage, but the magical structure remained intact. Whatever Zabini had attempted with Morgan's magic had failed, thanks to Merlin's approach. But Harry couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. If Mrs. Zabini was merely an acolyte, then the true heir of Morgan, Draco, by all indications, was still developing their power, just as he was. And based on tonight's display, that power could be formidable indeed. What happened? Hermione asked once they were on the path back to the castle. That magic we saw. Morgan Le Fay's magic, Harry explained quietly. Or at least, magic based on her approach. Mrs. Zabini was trying to break Hogsmeade's protective wards. And you stopped her, Ginny said, looking impressed. With Merlin's magic? Harry nodded. It was like, their magic is fundamentally different. Not just different spells, but different approaches to how magic works. She was trying to force reality to bend to her will. I was trying to work with reality to redirect her energy. Mental, Ron breathed. Absolutely mental. The scary thing is, Harry continued, I think she was just testing the waters. Seeing what they could do with Morgan's approach, maybe seeing if I would show up. Well, you certainly showed them, Ginny said, squeezing his arm supportively. Yeah, Harry agreed, though he wasn't entirely convinced. Something about the encounter bothered him, the way Mrs. Zabini had seemed almost pleased to confirm his identity, despite her spell being thwarted. As they neared the castle, Harry felt the tracking spell tug at his awareness. Draco was in the astronomy tower, his emotional state a complex tangle of fear, guilt, and something that felt almost like relief. Interesting timing. Had he known about the attack? Was he connected to Mrs. Zabini somehow? Harry needed answers, but they would have to wait. Right now, he could barely put one foot in front of the other. Let's get you to the hospital wing, Hermione suggested as they entered the castle. No, Harry said firmly. Madame Pomfrey will ask too many questions. I just need to rest. They managed to reach Gryffindor Tower without encountering teachers or prefects, most of whom were still dealing with the aftermath in Hogsmeade. The common room was packed with anxious students, all talking excitedly about the attack and the strange lights seen from the castle windows. Conversation died as they entered, dozens of eyes turning to Harry, who realized belatedly that his robes were singed and his face probably showed the strain of the magical battle. What happened? Was it you-know-who? Did you fight Death Eaters? The questions came from all directions. Ron stepped forward, ever the strategist. Everyone back off, he commanded. Harry needs rest. McGonagall will give us all the details when she gets back. Surprisingly, this worked. The crowd parted, though curious eyes followed Harry as his friends helped him toward the stairs to the boys' dormitory. I'll bring up some food, Ginny offered. You look like you could use it. Harry nodded gratefully. Once in the dormitory, Ron helped him to his bed while Hermione conjured a glass of water. You really did use up a lot of magic, she observed, studying him critically. Your magical aura is notably diminished. You can see auras now? Harry asked, surprised. No, but I can feel them with a detection charm Flitwick taught me last year, Hermione explained. Yours usually feels like standing near a bonfire. Right now it's more like a candle. Harry sipped the water, feeling the cool liquid revive him slightly. It'll recover. Merlin's magic is powerful, but it takes more focus than regular spells. Speaking of Merlin, Ron said, sitting on his own bed, did you find out anything useful from Malfoy before all hell broke loose? Harry hesitated, then decided his friends deserved the full story. He has a ring, Morgan Le Fay's ring. It activated for him around the same time my amulet activated for me. He's definitely her heir. Bloody hell, Ron muttered. Malfoy with ancient evil witch powers. Just what we needed. I don't think it's that simple, Harry said, remembering Draco's tear-stained face and genuine fear. He's scared. Voldemort's forcing him to do something, fix that cabinet, which Hermione thinks might be a vanishing cabinet. And he doesn't understand what's happening with Morgan's magic any more than I initially did with Merlin's. So what, we're supposed to feel sorry for him? Ron asked incredulously. Not sorry, Harry corrected. But maybe, understanding. Morgan and Merlin weren't always enemies. They started as colleagues, even friends. Their approaches to magic were different, but complementary. It was only later that they became rivals. You got all that from Merlin's memories? Hermione asked, fascinated. Harry nodded. It's complicated. But I think the important thing is that Draco being Morgan's heir doesn't automatically make him our enemy. It gives us a potential connection, a way to reach him. And potentially pull him away from Voldemort, Ginny added, returning with a plate of sandwiches and fruit. Which would be a significant win. Ron looked skeptical but didn't argue further. So what's our next move? Rest, for tonight, Harry said, gratefully accepting a sandwich from Ginny. Tomorrow, I talk to Dumbledore about what happened in Hogsmeade and try to connect with Draco again. And we need to step up our training with Merlin's magic. What about the Keepers of Albion? Hermione asked. Elaine said she'd return in 3 days. I think we'll need their help sooner rather than later, Harry admitted. Especially if Mrs. Zabini was just the beginning. There's clearly a larger plan involving Morgan's magic, and we need to understand it better. As they continued discussing possibilities, Harry felt his energy slowly returning. The food helped, as did the simple comfort of being with his friends. Whatever was coming, Voldemort, Morgan's heir, the Ministry's ongoing suspicions, at least he wasn't facing it alone. Later, as Ron and the others returned to the common room to gather information about the attack, Harry lay on his bed, the amulet glowing softly in his hand. He reached out mentally to the tracking spell, checking on Draco. The Slytherin was back in his dormitory now, his emotional state calmer but still troubled. What are you up to, Malfoy? Harry murmured. And which side are you really on? The amulet pulsed once, as if in response, and a fragment of memory surfaced in Harry's mind, Merlin and Morgan standing together atop a windswept hill, their magics intertwining, blue and green, in a spectacular display of complementary power. Before they became rivals. Before they chose different paths. Perhaps history didn't have to repeat itself after all. Chapter 3, The Rival. The next morning, Harry woke to find Hogwarts buzzing with rumors. Stories about the Hogsmeade attack had morphed overnight, each version more dramatic than the last. By breakfast, half the school believed Voldemort himself had appeared, while the other half was convinced Harry had single-handedly fought off 20 Death Eaters with never-before-seen magic. You're basically a legend now, Ron said, dropping into the seat beside Harry and grabbing a piece of toast. Just heard some second-years saying you flew without a broom and shot lightning from your eyes. Brilliant, Harry muttered, pushing his eggs around his plate. Just what I needed. His magical energy had mostly recovered overnight, but the events in Hogsmeade had left him unsettled. Mrs. Zabini's words kept replaying in his mind, the heir. At last. She hadn't seemed surprised, more like she'd been expecting him. Any news from Dumbledore? Hermione asked, joining them with the Morning Prophet in hand. Harry shook his head. Nothing yet. But I've got that meeting with the Keepers of Albion tonight. Look at this, Hermione said, spreading the newspaper on the table. The headline screamed, Magical Disturbances Across Britain, Ministry Baffled. The article detailed strange magical phenomena occurring throughout the country, unexplained weather patterns in Wales, ancient standing stones suddenly glowing in Cornwall, and magical creatures behaving erratically in the Scottish Highlands. It's happening everywhere, Harry said quietly. The awakening of these old magics, it's affecting more than just me and Malfoy. Speaking of Malfoy, Ron nodded toward the Slytherin table, where Draco sat alone, picking at his food. He looks even worse than yesterday. Harry followed Ron's gaze. Draco did look awful, pale and drawn, with dark shadows under his eyes. As if sensing Harry's attention, he looked up, their eyes meeting briefly across the hall before Draco quickly looked away. I need to talk to him, Harry decided. Today. Be careful, Ginny warned, sliding into the seat beside him. After what happened in Hogsmeade, everyone's on edge. McGonagall's just announced all Hogsmeade visits are cancelled until further notice. Great, Ron groaned. Locked in the castle with nothing to do. Nothing except prevent ancient magical warfare and stop Voldemort, Hermione reminded him dryly. Yeah, nothing fun, Ron shot back with a grin. Harry couldn't help smiling despite his worries. Ron's ability to find humor in the darkest situations was one of the things he valued most about his friend. The smile faded as he noticed Professor McGonagall approaching their table, her expression severe even by her standards. Mr. Potter, she said crisply, the headmaster requests your presence in his office immediately. Harry nodded, pushing away his barely touched breakfast. I'll meet you guys in the room of requirement later, he told his friends before following McGonagall from the hall. As they walked, McGonagall kept her voice low. I should inform you, Potter, that ministry officials have returned following last night's events. It seems your display of unusual magic has not gone unnoticed. Great, Harry muttered. Winchcombe again. Indeed, along with representatives from the Auror office this time. McGonagall's lips thinned disapprovingly. The minister himself is considering making an appearance. Harry's stomach tightened. Scrimgeour had been pushing for a meeting with him since taking office, wanting to parade Harry as the ministry's supporter. This would give him the perfect excuse. Professor, Harry said hesitantly, about last night, that magic I used. McGonagall stopped, fixing him with her penetrating gaze. Was the magic of Merlin himself, if I'm not mistaken? Harry blinked in surprise. You know. I suspected after your remarkable shield charm in class, she replied. Last night confirmed it. The blue energy, the approach to countermagic rather than direct opposition, classic Merlin, according to historical accounts. A rare smile briefly softened her expression. I am a transfiguration mistress, Potter. The history of magical theory is somewhat my specialty. And you're not, shocked? That Merlin's blood runs in your veins? Perhaps I should be. McGonagall resumed walking. But after everything else you've faced, Potter, this seems almost fitting, somehow. They reached the gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office. Acid pops, McGonagall stated, and the gargoyle leapt aside. Professor, Harry said as they stepped onto the moving staircase, do you think Draco Malfoy could be Morgan Le Fay's heir? McGonagall's eyebrows rose. What makes you ask that? Just a theory, Harry hedged. She considered this as they ascended. The Malfoys are an ancient family, with connections to many magical bloodlines. It's not impossible. Her expression grew troubled. If true, it would explain certain observations about Mr. Malfoy this term. Before Harry could press further, they reached Dumbledore's office door, which swung open at their approach. Inside, Harry found not only Dumbledore but also Madame Winchcombe, a stern-looking Auror he didn't recognize, and to his surprise, Elaine Corbenic of the Keepers of Albion, who offered him a subtle nod of greeting. Ah, Harry, Dumbledore said warmly. Thank you for joining us. I believe you know Madame Winchcombe. This is Auror Savage from the Ministry, and of course, Madame Corbenic. Mr. Potter, Winchcombe said, her voice cooler than ever. It seems our conversation about unusual magic was more relevant than you indicated. I told you what I knew at the time, Harry replied evenly. Did you? Winchcombe pressed. Because the magic displayed in Hogsmeade last night goes well beyond anything found in the Black Family Library. Our analysts identified it as pre-Arthurian thaumaturgy, specifically, Emery's pattern magical harmonics. Fascinating terminology, Elaine interjected smoothly. Though perhaps somewhat imprecise. The resonance patterns of ancient British magic are notoriously difficult to categorize. Winchcombe's eyes narrowed at the interruption. The Keepers of Albion may have their own classification system, Madame Corbenic, but the Department of Mysteries has been studying these phenomena for centuries. Indeed, Elaine replied pleasantly. Almost as long as we have. The tension in the room was palpable. Harry glanced at Dumbledore, who seemed content to let this play out for the moment. "If I may," Auror Savage spoke up, his voice surprisingly gentle for his imposing appearance. "The immediate concern is security. Last night's attack featured not only Death Eaters but magic that hasn't been seen in Britain for generations. The Minister is concerned this represents an escalation in you-know-who's capabilities." "A reasonable concern," Dumbledore acknowledged, finally joining the conversation. "Though I believe the magic in question did not originate with Voldemort himself, but rather with associates who have accessed ancient knowledge independently." "Associates such as Camellia Zabini?" Winchcombe asked sharply. "You've identified her?" Harry blurted out, surprised. "We have resources, Mr. Potter," Winchcombe replied dryly. "Mrs. Zabini was recognized by multiple witnesses, and her magical signature was recorded by our instruments. What remains unclear is how she accessed such ancient magic, and how you countered it." All eyes turned to Harry, who felt suddenly trapped. How much should he reveal? Dumbledore gave him a subtle nod, which Harry interpreted as permission to be at least partially honest. "I've been studying ancient magical approaches," Harry said carefully. "Not just specific spells, but the underlying principles. When I saw what Mrs. Zabini was doing, I recognized the pattern and countered it using similar principles." "And where exactly did you study these ancient magical approaches?" Auror Savage asked. Before Harry could formulate a response, Elaine stepped in. "Mr. Potter has been receiving guidance from the Keepers of Albian, with Headmaster Dumbledore's permission. We specialize in preserving ancient British magical traditions." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it conveniently sidestepped the whole inheritance issue. Harry shot her a grateful look. "Why wasn't the Ministry informed of this arrangement?" Winchcombe demanded. "The educational content of Hogwarts remains under the headmaster's jurisdiction," McGonagall stated firmly. "Supplementary instruction has never required Ministry notification, particularly when it concerns defensive magic during wartime." The bureaucratic defense was surprisingly effective. Winchcombe looked frustrated but couldn't easily counter it. "Nevertheless," Auror Savage continued, "given the current situation, the Minister believes more direct cooperation is needed. He's requested that Mr. Potter visit the Ministry for a comprehensive briefing on these ancient magical threats." And there it was, Scrimgeour's play to get Harry under Ministry control. "I'm afraid my schedule is quite full with classes and these additional studies," Harry replied. "Perhaps another time." "This isn't optional, Mr. Potter," Winchcombe said coldly. "The Magical Security Act gives the Ministry authority to, I believe," Dumbledore interrupted, his voice suddenly steel beneath the usual gentleness, "that you'll find the Act specifically exempts educational institutions except in cases of immediate danger to the general public. Harry's presence at Hogwarts poses no such danger. Indeed, as last night demonstrated, his abilities have proven vital to public safety." The standoff continued for several more minutes, with the Ministry officials pressing for greater oversight of Harry's activities and Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Elaine presenting a united front against such intrusion. Harry remained silent, watching the political maneuvering with growing frustration. Finally, Winchcombe conceded temporary defeat. "Very well. But the department will continue monitoring magical anomalies, and we expect to be informed immediately of any further developments." She fixed Harry with a penetrating stare. "Ancient magic is not a toy, Mr. Potter, no matter what your tutors may tell you. It has consequences beyond your understanding." "I'm well aware of that," Harry replied, thinking of the exhaustion that had followed his countermagic in Hogsmeade. After the Ministry officials departed, Dumbledore sighed heavily. "I fear that is only the beginning of the Ministry's interest in your abilities, Harry." "They suspect, don't they?" Harry asked. "About Merlin's heir?" "They suspect something," Elaine confirmed. "The Department of Mysteries has long studied magical bloodlines and inherited abilities. They'll be connecting the dots quickly." "Which brings us to our more immediate concerns," Dumbledore said, gesturing for everyone to sit. Last night's attack was significant not only for its use of ancient magic but for what it reveals about our opponent's knowledge and intentions. You believe Voldemort is actively pursuing Morgan Le Fay's magic? Harry asked. I believe he is pursuing any power that might give him an advantage, Dumbledore replied. If he has indeed discovered the awakening of Morgan's bloodline, he will certainly attempt to control or exploit it. The magical disturbances reported in the Prophet, Harry said, remembering the morning's headline. They're connected to all this, aren't they? Elaine nodded. The awakening of two such powerful magical bloodlines after centuries of dormancy has created ripples throughout Britain's magical fabric. Ancient sites are responding, magical creatures sensing the shift in power. It's like the land itself is waking up. Which makes your training all the more urgent, Dumbledore added. Madame Corbenic has my full support to accelerate your instruction in Merlin's magic. I suggest beginning immediately. What about my friends? Harry asked. They've been training with me, learning some of the basic spells. A wise approach, Elaine approved. Merlin himself had trusted companions who learned aspects of his magic. They can continue their training, though certain knowledge must remain limited to the bloodline itself. McGonagall rose. I'll ensure you have the necessary time and privacy for these lessons, Potter. Your professors will be informed that you're undertaking special project work. Thank you, Professor, Harry said gratefully. One more thing before you go, Harry, Dumbledore said, his expression growing serious. Have you made any progress in identifying Morgan's heir? Harry hesitated, then decided to trust his instincts. I believe it's Draco Malfoy, sir. He has a ring, similar to my amulet, that activated recently. And he's been researching Morgan Le Fay. Dumbledore exchanged a glance with Elaine, who looked troubled by this information. The Malfoy bloodline does indeed connect to several ancient families that could potentially trace back to Morgan, she confirmed. But with his father's allegiance to Voldemort, it complicates matters considerably, Dumbledore finished. Have you spoken with Mr. Malfoy about this? Briefly, Harry admitted. He's scared and confused about what's happening to him. And Voldemort is forcing him to do something involving a cabinet in the Room of Requirement. A vanishing cabinet, most likely, Dumbledore mused. A clever approach to bypassing Hogwarts protections. He didn't seem particularly concerned by this revelation, which struck Harry as odd. Shouldn't we stop him? Harry asked. All in good time, Dumbledore replied cryptically. For now, I believe your connection to Mr. Malfoy through these ancient bloodlines may prove more valuable than immediate intervention. If you can reach him, help him understand his inheritance separate from Voldemort's influence. You want me to turn him, Harry realized. Use the Morgan-Merlin connection to pull him away from Voldemort. Precisely, Dumbledore confirmed. Though I would frame it less as turning him and more as helping him discover his true path. The heir of Morgan need not follow the dark road Voldemort offers. History need not repeat itself, Elaine added meaningfully. Harry nodded, understanding what they were suggesting. Draco stood at a crossroads, torn between Voldemort's demands, his family's expectations, and now this ancient magical inheritance. If Harry could influence that choice. I'll try to talk to him again, Harry promised. Though he's not exactly my biggest fan. You might find that circumstances have created more common ground than you realize, Dumbledore said with a small smile. Now, I believe Madame Corbenic has much to teach you. I suggest you make the most of this opportunity. The first thing you must understand, Elaine explained as they walked toward the Room of Requirement, is that Merlin's approach to magic differs fundamentally from what you've been taught at Hogwarts. I've noticed, Harry replied, thinking of the counter-magic he'd used in Hogsmeade. It's more about working with magical forces than controlling them. Exactly. Elaine looked impressed. Modern magic has become increasingly mechanistic, specific words, specific wand movements, specific effects. Efficient for teaching, but limiting in its approach. Merlin saw magic as a conversation with reality, not a command given to it. They reached the room of requirement to find Ron, Hermione, and Ginny already waiting. After brief introductions, Elaine asked the room to transform into a training space specifically designed for ancient magic. The result was breathtaking. The room expanded into a circular chamber with a domed ceiling painted to resemble the night sky. The floor featured intricate spiral patterns in stone, and crystal formations rose from strategic points around the perimeter, pulsing gently with inner light. "Whoa," Ron breathed. "Fancy." "The geometries matter," Elaine explained, moving to the center of the room. Ancient magic responds to patterns and harmonies in ways modern practitioners have largely forgotten. For the next 2 hours, she guided them through exercises unlike anything they'd learned at Hogwarts. While Ron, Hermione, and Ginny worked on basic techniques, Elaine took Harry deeper into Merlin's approach, helping him access and organize the growing knowledge in his mental tower. "The memories you're receiving," she explained during a brief rest, "aren't just spells but Merlin's actual experiences. Learning to separate them from your own consciousness is crucial." "They don't feel separate," Harry admitted. "They feel like they're mine, just from a long time ago." Elaine nodded. "That's both the gift and the danger of blood inheritance magic. The line between yourself and your ancestor can blur. Some heirs have lost themselves entirely in the past." "Cheerful thought," Harry muttered. "Just be mindful," Elaine advised. "When you access a memory or spell, notice the difference in perspective, in how magic feels. Merlin lived in a different world with different magical principles. Adapt his knowledge to your reality, don't get lost in his." The practical applications were fascinating. Harry learned to channel magic through the amulet, using it as both focus and filter for Merlin's more complex spells. He mastered several defensive enchantments that could protect entire areas rather than just individuals, and began exploring the sympathetic magic that formed the basis of Merlin's approach to healing. "This is brilliant," Ron said during their final break, watching as Harry demonstrated a spell that could purify water across an entire lake with a single casting. "Imagine what the Department of Magical Catastrophes could do with this stuff." "That's exactly what the Ministry fears," Elaine said quietly. "Magic this powerful in the hands of a 16-year-old, it disrupts their carefully constructed hierarchy of magical authority." "Is that why they were so interested in Harry?" Hermione asked. "Political control." "Partially," Elaine confirmed. "But there's legitimate concern too. Ancient magic can be dangerous when misapplied. They're not entirely wrong to be cautious." Harry thought of Mrs. Zabini's green vortex tearing at the fabric of Hogsmeade's wards. Like Morgan's approach. "Yes, though even Merlin's magic can be destructive if used improperly," Elaine cautioned. "The difference is in intention and approach, not inherent morality. Morgan sought control, Merlin sought harmony, but both were incredibly powerful, and both could cause tremendous damage." After the session ended, Elaine pulled Harry aside while the others gathered their things. "There's something else you should know," she said quietly. "The Keepers have detected unusual magical activity near Little Hangleton." Harry tensed. "Voldemort." "Most likely. Our sentinels reported energy patterns consistent with attempts to access ancestral magic, though not successfully, it seems. He's searching, Harry. For power to match what he witnessed in Hogsmeade. He knows about me. About Merlin's heir. We believe so, Elaine confirmed grimly. Which means you must accelerate your training. Tomorrow, we'll need to visit Puzzlewood, the second chamber I mentioned. There are protections there you'll need to master, quickly. Harry nodded, the gravity of the situation settling over him like a weight. I'll be ready. As Elaine departed, Harry felt a familiar tug from the tracking spell. Draco was on the move again, heading toward the 7th floor. The room of requirement, most likely. You guys go ahead, Harry told his friends. I need to check something. Hermione gave him a knowing look. Malfoy? Harry nodded. If he's Morgan's heir, we need to know whose side he's really on. Be careful, Ginny warned. And use the medallion if you need us. Harry patted the enchanted galleon in his pocket, Hermione's creation from their DA days, repurposed for their current needs. I will. Under his invisibility cloak, Harry made his way through the corridors, following the tracking spell's pull. Sure enough, it led him to the 7th floor, where he found Draco pacing before the blank wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. Harry hesitated, then made his decision. Removing the cloak, he stepped into view just as the door to the room of requirement began to materialize. Malfoy. Draco spun around, wand instantly in hand. Potter. Are you following me? We need to talk, Harry said simply, ignoring the question. About what happened in Hogsmeade. About Morgan Le Fay and Merlin. Draco's face paled slightly, but his wand remained steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Harry took a calculated risk, pulling the amulet from beneath his robes and letting it glow visibly. Just like you know what this is, and what your ring means. Draco's eyes fixed on the amulet, his expression a complex mixture of fear, recognition, and something like longing. After a moment of internal struggle, he lowered his wand slightly. Not here, he said finally. Inside. The room had transformed into a simple, neutral space, comfortable chairs around a small fire, with high windows letting in autumn sunlight. Nothing like the vast junk-filled cavern where the vanishing cabinet was hidden. You changed what you asked for, Harry observed as they entered. Obviously, Draco replied, some of his usual snark returning. I'm not an idiot, Potter. They settled into chairs across from each other, an uneasy tension filling the space between them. Draco looked terrible up close, thinner than ever, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of neglect. That was your magic in Hogsmeade, Draco said finally. The blue energy that stopped Mrs. Zabini's attack. Harry nodded. Merlin's approach. Just like hers was Morgan's. Draco's hand went unconsciously to his pocket, where Harry assumed the ring was hidden. How much do you know? That you're Morgan Le Fay's heir, Harry replied directly. That the ring activated for you around the same time my amulet activated for me. That you're struggling with magic you don't fully understand while trying to complete a task for Voldemort that you don't want to do. Draco flinched at Voldemort's name. You don't know anything about what I want, Potter. Then tell me, Harry challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who's in way over his head and running out of options. For a moment, Harry thought Draco would storm out, or attack him. Instead, the Slytherin seemed to deflate slightly. He'll kill my parents if I fail, Draco said, his voice barely above a whisper. He's living in our home, using it as his base. My father's in Azkaban, and my mother's basically a hostage. He gave me an impossible task as punishment for my father's failures. Fixing the vanishing cabinet, Harry guessed. To let Death Eaters into Hogwarts. Draco looked up sharply. How did you? I saw you working on it, Harry admitted. And Hermione figured out what it was. Of course she did, Draco muttered, but without his usual venom. Always the know-it-all. What's the purpose? Harry pressed. Once you get it working, then what? Draco hesitated, conflict evident on his face. An attack on the school. Taking control of Hogwarts would be a major victory for him. Harry felt cold dread settle in his stomach. When? I don't know, Draco said. The cabinet's still not working properly. Things go through but come back, damaged. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. And then this happened. He pulled the ring from his pocket, a heavy silver band set with a dark stone etched with a spiral pattern. Even from across the room, Harry could feel its power, similar to his amulet but fundamentally different in its magical signature. When did you find it? Harry asked. Over the summer, at the manor. It was in a hidden compartment in my mother's jewelry box. I was looking for. Draco trailed off, then seemed to catch himself. It doesn't matter. The ring seemed to call to me. And then the dreams started. Dreams about Morgan, Harry said. About her magic. Draco nodded. At first, I thought it was just stress, with everything happening at home. But then I started being able to do things, wandless magic, ancient spells I'd never learned. It scared me. Did you tell anyone? Your mother. Snape. Draco laughed bitterly. Tell the Dark Lord's followers that I've suddenly developed unusual magical abilities. That would go well. He shook his head. I've been researching on my own, trying to understand what's happening. And Mrs. Zabini? Is she connected to this? A flicker of surprise crossed Draco's face. Blaze's mother? Why would you? He stopped, realization dawning. It was her in Hogsmeade, wasn't it? Using Morgan's magic. You didn't know? Harry asked, surprised. No, Draco said firmly. I knew someone was using similar magic, I could feel it, but I had no idea it was her. He looked genuinely disturbed by this information. Blaze never mentioned his mother being involved with any of this. She called herself an acolyte, Harry explained. Working for the true heir, she implied. Not me, Draco said immediately. I haven't told anyone about the ring or the magic. Not even Crabbe and Goyle. Harry believed him, which raised troubling questions. If Draco wasn't guiding Mrs. Zabini, who was? Was there another heir of Morgan they didn't know about? So where does that leave us? Harry asked after a moment. Draco looked at him warily. What do you mean? Historically, Merlin and Morgan were rivals, but they started as allies. Their approaches to magic were different but complementary. Harry leaned forward slightly. We don't have to be enemies because of our bloodlines, Malfoy. We're enemies because you're Potter and I'm Malfoy, Draco replied, though without much conviction. Because you're Dumbledore's golden boy and I'm. He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. You're what? Harry pressed. A Death Eater? Because from where I'm sitting, you don't seem very enthusiastic about Voldemort's plans. Draco flinched again at the name. It's not that simple. My family, your family is in danger, I get that, Harry interrupted. But this inheritance changes things. Morgan's magic is powerful, Malfoy. Combined with Merlin's approach, we might have options that didn't exist before. Options like what? Draco asked, a hint of desperate hope creeping into his voice despite his obvious attempt to sound skeptical. Protection for your family, for one, Harry suggested. Ways to counter Voldemort that he won't expect. You think Dumbledore would protect my parents? Death Eaters? Draco scoffed. I think he'd try, Harry said honestly. Especially if it meant gaining an ally with Morgan's magic on our side. Draco fell silent, clearly wrestling with conflicting loyalties and fears. Even if I wanted to, he said finally, it's too late. The Dark Lord is in my home. He has my mother. And he's given me a direct order about the cabinet. So stall, Harry suggested. Keep working on it, but slowly. Buy time while we figure out options. We? Draco raised an eyebrow. Since when is there a we, Potter? Since we both inherited ancient magic that somehow connected, Harry replied simply. Like it or not, our bloodlines are tied together. Maybe that means something. Draco studied him for a long moment, suspicion warring with desperate need for any alternative to his current path. If this is some trick to get me to betray my family, it's not, Harry said firmly. Look, we don't have to be best mates. But we might be able to help each other understand these inheritances. And maybe find a way out of the corner Voldemort's backed you into. After what seemed like an eternity of consideration, Draco gave a small, reluctant nod. I'm not agreeing to anything specific, he clarified quickly. But I'll listen. And maybe share what I'm learning about Morgan's approach. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Good enough for now, Harry agreed. We could meet here, neutral ground. Not too often, Draco cautioned. People would notice. Tomorrow night? Harry suggested. After dinner? I'll have learned more by then. Draco nodded stiffly, then stood. I should go. People will wonder where I am. He hesitated, then added awkwardly, thanks. For not just turning me in about the cabinet. Everyone deserves a chance to choose their own path, Harry said. Even you, Malfoy. A ghost of a smile touched Draco's lips. Even you, Potter. As Draco left, Harry remained seated, processing everything he'd learned. The conversation had gone better than he'd dared hope, but they were still a long way from true alliance. And the revelation that Mrs. Zabini was working with someone else, someone who might also claim Morgan's legacy, added a troubling new dimension to an already complex situation. One thing was clear, time was running short. Between Voldemort's growing interest in ancient magic, the Ministry's increased scrutiny, and the mysterious figure guiding Mrs. Zabini, the pressure was mounting from all sides. Harry needed to master Merlin's inheritance quickly, and help Draco understand Morgan's approach as well. Because something told him they'd need both bloodlines working together to face what was coming. The next day passed in a blur of classes, secret training, and hushed planning. Harry filled his friends in on his conversation with Draco, facing predictably mixed reactions. You can't seriously trust him, Ron protested as they walked to Transfiguration. This is Malfoy we're talking about. I don't trust him completely, Harry clarified. But I believe he's genuinely trapped and looking for options. And as Morgan's heir, he could be incredibly valuable. It's strategically sound, Hermione admitted reluctantly. If we could turn Draco away from Voldemort, it would be a significant coup. And the magical theory of having both Merlin and Morgan's approaches working together is fascinating. Just be careful, Ginny advised. Desperate people are unpredictable. Throughout the day, Harry noticed Draco watching him during shared classes and meals, not with the usual hostility, but with cautious curiosity. The tracking spell indicated Draco's emotional state had shifted from overwhelming dread to a complex mixture of fear, hope, and confusion. Progress, of a sort. After dinner, Harry met Elaine at the edge of the Forbidden Forest, where a thestral-drawn carriage waited to take them to Puzzlewood. We'll need to be quick, Elaine explained as they climbed in. The Ministry has increased patrols around magical sites since the disturbances began. How will we get back into Hogwarts? Harry asked as the carriage rose into the air, invisible to most eyes. Merlin's chambers are connected, Elaine explained. Once activated by the air, passages open between them. You'll be able to return directly to the Hogwarts chamber once we've completed the necessary rituals. The journey took less than an hour, the magical carriage covering distance far more efficiently than conventional travel. They landed in a small clearing surrounded by ancient, moss-covered trees that seemed to twist and curve in impossible ways. Puzzlewood, Elaine said, leading him down a narrow path. One of Britain's oldest magical sites. Merlin studied here for years, learning from the forest itself. Harry could feel the magic in the air, wild, ancient, and somehow expectant, as if the forest itself was aware of his presence. The trees seemed to lean in slightly as they passed, branches shifting to clear their path. It knows you, Elaine confirmed, noticing his reaction. The land recognizes Merlin's blood. They followed winding paths through moss-draped gorges and strange rock formations until they reached a particularly ancient oak. Its massive trunk was twisted into what looked almost like a doorway, the bark forming intricate patterns that reminded Harry of the symbols on his amulet. Here we are, Elaine said, stopping before the tree. The entrance to Merlin's second chamber. Harry reached for the amulet, which had grown warm against his chest. As he touched it, the symbols in the bark began to glow with the same blue light. The key, Elaine prompted. Harry withdrew the small ornate key she had given him earlier. It fit perfectly into a nearly invisible keyhole within the twisted bark. As he turned it, the wood seemed to ripple and part, revealing a staircase descending into the earth. This chamber focuses on elemental magic and healing, Elaine explained as they descended. The foundations of Merlin's approach to working with natural forces rather than against them. The chamber below was breathtaking, a vast natural cavern transformed into a magical workspace. Crystal formations grew from the ceiling and floor, pulsing with gentle light. An underground stream flowed through the center, its water glowing with an inner luminescence. Along the walls stood shelves filled with ancient texts and strange instruments. "This is incredible," Harry breathed, feeling the magic wash over him like a physical presence. "This is where Merlin developed his most fundamental approaches," Elaine said, moving to a central pedestal where a familiar crystal basin similar to the one in the Hogwarts chamber waited. "And where you will learn to master the elements." The next 2 hours were among the most intense magical experiences of Harry's life. Through the basin, he accessed more of Merlin's memories, not just spell knowledge this time, but deep understanding of magical principles that underpinned entire branches of magic. He learned how elemental forces could be guided rather than commanded, how healing magic worked with the body's natural processes rather than forcing change upon it. He practiced manipulating earth, air, water, and fire using only intention and understanding, without specific incantations or wand movements. "Modern magic has forgotten these foundations," Elaine explained as Harry successfully called forth a perfect sphere of water from the stream, shaped it into various forms, and then returned it without a drop spilled. "Wizards think of elements as things to be controlled, not partners to be respected. It's like having a conversation instead of giving orders," Harry realized, finally understanding what she'd been trying to explain earlier. "Exactly." Elaine looked pleased. "That's the core of Merlin's approach, magic as dialogue with reality, not domination of it." As their session neared its end, Elaine led Harry to a sealed alcove at the far end of the chamber. "There's one more thing you should see today," she said, her expression growing serious. "Something Merlin created as a last resort." The alcove contained a single pedestal upon which rested a small crystal phial filled with what looked like liquid starlight. Even without touching it, Harry could feel its immense power radiating outward. "What is it?" he asked, instinctively keeping his distance. "Merlin called it the harmonic convergence," Elaine replied softly. "His most powerful spell, preserved in physical form. It has the power to realign magical forces across vast areas, to heal magical corruption, restore balance, even undo certain types of dark magic." "Like Voldemort's?" Harry asked, hope rising. Elaine's expression remained grave. "Potentially. But its use comes at great cost. Channeling that much harmonizing energy requires deep sacrifice from the caster. Merlin only used it once, to heal a magical cataclysm caused by Morgan's most destructive spell, and it nearly killed him." Harry stared at the phial, understanding its significance. "A last resort." "Exactly," Elaine confirmed. "I show you this not to encourage its use, but so you know it exists if all other options fail. The choice to use it would be yours alone, as Merlin's heir." Harry nodded solemnly, committing the phial's location to memory while hoping he'd never need to return for it. As they prepared to leave, Elaine guided him to a different exit, an archway carved into the rock wall, inscribed with the now familiar symbols of Merlin's magic. "This will take you directly back to the Hogwarts chamber," she explained. "The chambers are connected through magical space rather than physical distance. Once activated by the air, these passages remain open to you." "Convenient," Harry remarked. "Merlin was nothing if not practical," Elaine replied with a small smile. "I'll return to Hogwarts by more conventional means to avoid raising suspicions. Remember, practice what you've learned today, particularly the elemental harmonizing techniques. They form the foundation for Merlin's more advanced magics." Harry nodded, then stepped through the archway, feeling a brief sensation of floating between spaces before emerging into the circular chamber near the room of requirement. The transition was so smooth he could hardly believe he'd traveled hundreds of miles in a single step. Checking his watch, he saw it was nearly time for his meeting with Draco. As he left Merlin's chamber, he felt the tracking spell tug at his awareness. Draco was already approaching, his emotional state a jumble of anxiety, curiosity, and grim determination. Interesting. Something had changed since their last conversation. The room of requirement appeared as a comfortable study this time, bookshelves, a fireplace, and 2 armchairs with a small table between them. As Harry entered, he found Draco already waiting, pacing nervously before the fire. "What's wrong?" Harry asked immediately, sensing the tension radiating from the Slytherin. Draco spun around, his face even paler than usual. "He knows," he said without preamble. "The Dark Lord, he knows about the heirs. About Merlin and Morgan's magic awakening." Harry's stomach dropped. "How?" "My Aunt Bellatrix," Draco explained, his voice tight with suppressed panic. "She was in Hogsmeade, saw what happened with Mrs. Zabini. Recognized the magical signatures from old family records or something. Does he know it's you? That you're Morgan's heir?" Draco shook his head. "Not yet. But he's looking. Zabini's mother has been summoned. And," he swallowed hard, "he's planning something to draw out Merlin's heir. To identify and capture them." "Me," Harry said grimly. "Yes." Draco ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture Harry had never seen from him before. "But that's not all. I overheard Snape talking to my mother through the flue. The Dark Lord believes if he can capture Merlin's heir and extract their knowledge, he could gain access to magic even more powerful than what he's been pursuing." "The Horcruxes," Harry murmured, then caught himself. "The what?" Draco asked sharply. "Nothing," Harry said quickly. "Just something Dumbledore mentioned." "What else did you hear?" Draco looked suspicious but continued. "There's going to be an attack, bigger than Hogsmeade. Some kind of test of Morgan's approach to magic on a larger scale. And it's happening soon." "Where? When?" "I don't know exactly," Draco admitted. "But I heard Snape say something about when the veil thins, whatever that means." "Halloween," Hermione's voice came from behind them. Both boys turned to find her entering the room with Ron and Ginny close behind. "The veil between worlds is thinnest on Samhain, Halloween. It's when ancient magic traditionally reaches its peak." "What are they doing here?" Draco demanded, tensing visibly. "We're helping," Ron said bluntly, though his expression made it clear he wasn't thrilled about including Malfoy in their plans. "I didn't tell them to come," Harry assured Draco. "But they're part of this too. They've been training with Merlin's magic." "Doesn't mean I want Weasleys and mud," Draco caught himself, visibly struggling with old habits. "Granger," he amended awkwardly, "involved in my business. If Voldemort is planning a major attack using Morgan's magic, it's everyone's business," Ginny pointed out, crossing her arms. "And like it or not, Malfoy, you're going to need allies." Draco looked like he wanted to argue but instead slumped slightly. "Fine. Whatever. It's not like I have many options left." "Tell us everything you heard," Hermione prompted, her practical nature taking over as she conjured parchment and quill. Every detail could be important. For the next half hour, they pieced together what Draco had overheard, combining it with what they already knew about Voldemort's activities and the recent magical disturbances across Britain. "So Voldemort doesn't know Draco is Morgan's heir yet," Hermione summarized, reviewing her notes. "But he's actively searching, probably testing candidates from families with ancient bloodlines. And planning a major magical attack on Halloween," Harry added. "Using Morgan's approach, probably through Mrs. Zabini or whoever's guiding her. Meanwhile, he wants to capture Harry to extract Merlin's knowledge," Ron continued. "Probably because he can't access it directly himself." "And the cabinet?" Harry asked Draco. "What's the timeline for that?" Draco hesitated, conflict evident on his face. "It's progressing. Things can pass through now, but living subjects still come back, wrong somehow. It needs more work. Can you delay it?" Ginny asked directly. By time? Maybe, Draco admitted reluctantly. But if I stall too obviously, the Dark Lord will know. My mother. He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. The room fell silent as they all processed the gravity of the situation. Finally, Ron spoke up, surprising everyone. What if we fake progress, he suggested. Make it look like you're making headway on the cabinet while actually ensuring it won't work properly when they try to use it. Draco looked at Ron with genuine surprise. That's not completely stupid, Weasley. High praise, Ron muttered sarcastically. It could work, Hermione said thoughtfully. If we sabotage the cabinet in a way that's not immediately obvious. I'd need help understanding the magic involved, Draco admitted reluctantly. The cabinet uses spatial folding principles I haven't fully grasped. I can help with that, Hermione offered, ignoring Ron's shocked expression. Magical transportation theory is fascinating. Harry watched this unexpected cooperation with amazement. 24 hours ago, the idea of Ron and Hermione working with Draco Malfoy would have seemed impossible. Yet here they were, tentatively forming an alliance against a common threat. There's something else, Harry said, remembering his session with Elaine. I visited another of Merlin's chambers today. Learned more about elemental magic and his approach to natural forces. Anything useful against whatever Voldemort's planning? Ginny asked. Maybe. Harry hesitated, then decided they needed to know. There's a spell, Merlin's most powerful. The Harmonic Convergence. It can realign magical forces across large areas, potentially counter even powerful dark magic. But it's dangerous to the caster. How dangerous? Hermione asked sharply. Nearly killed Merlin when he used it, Harry admitted. It's a last resort, but it exists if we need it. You're not using any spell that might kill you, Ginny said firmly. Agreed, Ron added. There has to be another way. What about Morgan's approach? Hermione asked suddenly, turning to Draco. What have you learned from the ring and the dreams? Draco looked uncomfortable with the direct question but answered after a moment. It's different from conventional magic. More direct. Instead of working through established patterns like spells, it imposes will directly on reality. That sounds powerful, Ron observed. It is, Draco confirmed. But it's exhausting and unstable. The few times I've tried it intentionally, I've ended up with splitting headaches and magical backlash. Because you're fighting the natural order rather than working with it, Harry realized, connecting this to what he'd learned from Elaine. Morgan's approach forces change, Merlin's guides it. But what if they were combined? Hermione suggested, her eyes lighting up with theoretical excitement. Merlin's harmonizing approach with Morgan's direct application, it could create effects neither could achieve alone. That's actually brilliant, Granger, Draco admitted reluctantly. The historical accounts I've found mention that Merlin and Morgan did work together before their falling out. Their combined magic accomplished things neither could do individually. So maybe that's our answer, Harry said, hope stirring. Not just me using Merlin's approach, or Draco using Morgan's, but both of us working together. The heirs united, Ginny mused. Breaking the historical cycle. Draco looked skeptical. It's a nice theory, but we have no idea how to actually combine these magical approaches. And we're hardly Merlin and Morgan themselves, we're just teenagers who inherited fragments of their knowledge. Then we practice, Harry said firmly. Here, in the room of requirement. We figure out how our approaches can work together before Voldemort makes his move. And what about the cabinet? Draco pressed. The Dark Lord expects progress. Show him progress, Ron suggested. Just make sure it's the wrong kind. Hermione can help figure out how to sabotage it properly. For a moment, Draco looked overwhelmed by the rapidly forming plans and unexpected alliances. Then, with visible effort, he straightened his shoulders and nodded. All right. But if this goes wrong, if my mother gets hurt, we'll do everything we can to protect her, Harry promised. That's part of the deal. We help each other. Draco studied him for a long moment, then extended his hand, an echo of the offer Harry had rejected in their first year. Deal, Potter. Harry took his hand without hesitation. As their palms connected, both boys felt a surge of magic, blue and green energies briefly spiraling around their joined hands before dissipating. What was that? Ron asked, eyes wide. The bloodlines recognizing each other, Hermione whispered, looking odd. Merlin and Morgan's magic acknowledging the connection. Harry and Draco broke the handshake, both looking slightly stunned by what had happened. Well, Ginny said after a moment of stunned silence, I guess that settles it. We're really doing this. Tomorrow night, Harry decided. We start practicing combining our approaches. Hermione, you'll work with Draco on the cabinet issue? She nodded. I'll bring some references on spatial magic. I'll need to be careful, Draco warned. If the wrong people see us together. We'll use the invisibility cloak and Marauder's map, Harry assured him. No one will know. As they finalized their plans, Harry felt a strange mixture of hope and apprehension. They were attempting something unprecedented, not just cooperation between longtime enemies, but the reunification of magical approaches that had been separate for centuries. If they succeeded, they might create a new path forward, one that honored both magical traditions while breaking the cycle of rivalry that had defined them. If they failed, well, Voldemort would have access to ancient powers that could devastate the wizarding world. No pressure. The next week passed in a blur of secret training, hushed planning, and growing tension. By day, Harry attended classes, dealt with increased scrutiny from professors and students alike, and met regularly with Elaine to continue his formal training in Merlin's approach. By night, he and Draco worked in the room of requirement, cautiously exploring how their inherited magics might work together. Progress was slow and often frustrating. Their first attempts at combining magical approaches resulted in spectacular failures, spells that fizzled out, backfired, or produced entirely unexpected effects. One particularly memorable disaster left both boys with purple hair for 3 hours after a simple color-changing charm went wildly wrong. This is hopeless, Draco complained after their fourth session ended with a minor explosion. Our magics are fundamentally opposed. Morgan wanted to command reality, Merlin wanted to cooperate with it. They can't be reconciled. They can, Harry insisted stubbornly. They worked together before they became rivals. There has to be a way. The breakthrough came, surprisingly, from Ron. Watching their latest failed attempt from a safe distance, he observed, you're both trying to cast at exactly the same time, but you're not actually working together. It's like you're having two different conversations with magic instead of one joint discussion. Harry and Draco exchanged looks. What do you suggest? Harry asked. What if one of you establishes the magical framework, the intention and structure, and the other provides the direction and force? Ron suggested. Like in chess, when pieces work together with different movements but toward the same goal. That, actually makes sense, Draco admitted reluctantly. Potter could establish the harmonizing framework with Merlin's approach, and I could direct it with Morgan's precision. They tried again, with Harry beginning the spell, a simple attempt to transform a wooden cup into a glass one. Instead of forcing the change directly, he established a field of magical potential around the cup, creating possibilities rather than demands. Then, at precisely the right moment, he nodded to Draco. Draco, concentrating intensely, added Morgan's direct approach, not forcing the wood to become glass, but selecting that specific possibility from the field Harry had created and bringing it into reality. The cup transformed perfectly, but instead of a simple glass vessel, it became an intricately patterned crystal goblet of extraordinary beauty, far more refined than either could have produced alone. We did it, Harry breathed, examining the goblet with amazement. It's more than just success, Hermione noted, inspecting the result. It's synergy. The combined result is greater than what either approach could achieve independently. Over the following days, they refined this technique, learning to time their magical contributions perfectly and anticipate each other's intentions. The results were increasingly impressive: spells that worked more efficiently, lasted longer, and achieved effects neither tradition could manage alone. Meanwhile, Hermione worked with Draco on the Vanishing Cabinet, developing a subtle sabotage strategy that would allow him to demonstrate apparent progress while ensuring the cabinet would fail catastrophically if actually used for an invasion. The spatial folding will appear stable, she explained during one session, showing him complex arithmetic calculations, but it will actually create a recursive loop that prevents complete transit. Anyone trying to come through will end up stuck between spaces. Not fatal, but completely incapacitating, Draco observed, impressed despite himself. Clever, Granger. Just remember the activation sequence has to be precisely as we've designed it, she cautioned. One variation and it might actually work correctly. As Halloween approached, the signs of magical disturbance continued to increase across Britain. The Daily Prophet reported strange weather patterns, unexpected creature migrations, and ancient magical sites suddenly activating after centuries of dormancy. Within Hogwarts itself, the castle seemed more alive somehow, staircases moving with greater purpose, the magic in the walls pulsing more strongly. The veil is already thinning, Elaine explained during their final training session before Halloween. The ancient magic in the land is responding to both bloodlines being active again after so long. It's creating opportunities but also vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities Voldemort could exploit, Harry guessed. Precisely. Ancient sites that have been dormant for centuries are now accessible again. Powers that have been sealed away might be reached. Her expression grew grave. Our Sentinels report increased Death Eater activity around several key magical locations: Stonehenge, Avebury, the Rollright Stones. We believe they're testing defenses, preparing for something significant. On Halloween, Harry confirmed. We think that's when they'll make their move. It would be the logical time, Elaine agreed. When ancient magic reaches its peak potency. She studied him carefully. You've been working with Morgan's heir. It wasn't a question, but Harry nodded anyway. We've found ways to combine our approaches. It's still experimental, but promising. Remarkable, Elaine murmured. The Keepers have theoretical models of how such cooperation might work, but no practical examples since Merlin and Morgan themselves. She hesitated, then added, "Be careful, Harry. Even with the best intentions, the volatile nature of these magics when combined could be unpredictable." We're taking precautions, Harry assured her. And we don't have much choice. Whatever Voldemort's planning, we need every advantage we can get. That evening, Harry met with Dumbledore for what the headmaster called a critical update on their private lessons regarding Horcruxes. To Harry's surprise, Dumbledore seemed already aware of his alliance with Draco. Professor Snape has informed me of certain developments in Mr. Malfoy's situation, Dumbledore explained, his injured hand resting on his desk. Including his gradual shift in allegiance. You know about Snape's involvement? Harry asked, surprised. Professor Snape, Dumbledore corrected gently, has been monitoring Mr. Malfoy's activities at my request. His position is complex. Harry wanted to press further about Snape's true loyalties, but Dumbledore steered the conversation back to the matter at hand. Lord Voldemort has indeed become aware of the awakened bloodlines, he confirmed. My sources indicate he is particularly interested in capturing you, Harry, to extract Merlin's knowledge forcibly. But that's not possible, is it? Harry asked. The inheritance is tied to blood. He can't just take it. Not the inheritance itself, no, Dumbledore agreed. But the knowledge you've gained could potentially be extracted through certain dark magical means. Particularly with the veil between worlds thinning as we approach Samhain. Harry felt cold at the implication. Like legilimency? Far worse, I'm afraid. There exist rituals, ancient and terrible, that can extract magical knowledge directly from the mind, leaving the victim a hollow shell. Dumbledore's expression was grave. I believe this is Voldemort's intention, should he capture you. Well, he's not going to, Harry said with more confidence than he felt. We're preparing for whatever he's planning on Halloween. Indeed. And I believe your work with Mr. Malfoy may prove crucial. Dumbledore leaned forward slightly. The combination of Merlin and Morgan's approaches has not been attempted in centuries. It could provide an advantage Voldemort does not anticipate. That's the hope, Harry agreed. But Malfoy's still worried about his mother. As long as Voldemort has her. Arrangements are being made, Dumbledore said cryptically. Suffice it to say that when the moment comes, Narcissa Malfoy will have an opportunity for safety, should she choose to take it. The conversation then shifted to Horcruxes, Dumbledore sharing his discovery of the probable locations of several more of Voldemort's soul fragments and their plans to destroy them. The task seemed impossibly daunting, particularly with everything else happening, but Harry knew it was essential to Voldemort's ultimate defeat. As their meeting concluded, Dumbledore fixed Harry with his piercing blue gaze. Be vigilant in the coming days, Harry. I believe Voldemort will make his move very soon, possibly before Halloween itself. The thinning of the veil is already advanced enough for certain ancient magics to be viable. We'll be ready, Professor, Harry promised, though uncertainty gnawed at him. How could they possibly prepare for every contingency? The answer, as it turned out, was that they couldn't. The attack came 2 days before Halloween, catching everyone by surprise despite their vigilance. Harry was in potions class when he felt it, a massive surge of magical energy that made the amulet burn against his chest and sent a wave of nausea through him. Around the classroom, cauldrons bubbled over or froze solid as the ambient magic in the castle fluctuated wildly. Slughorn looked bewildered as his demonstration potion turned from clear to vibrant purple without any additional ingredients. What in Merlin's name, the professor began, but was cut off by the sound of alarm bells throughout the castle. Harry's eyes met Draco's across the room, both boys recognizing the magical signature, Morgan's approach, but amplified to an unprecedented degree. Without waiting for dismissal, they both bolted for the door, ignoring Slughorn's startled protests. In the corridor, they nearly collided with Ron and Hermione, who had been in charms. You felt it? Hermione asked breathlessly. Harry nodded grimly. It's happening. Now. They raced to the nearest window, where a crowd of students had already gathered, pointing and exclaiming in horror. Outside, the sky above the forbidden forest had turned an unnatural green, swirling with the same energy Harry had seen in Hogsmeade, but on a vastly larger scale. It centered on the stone circle, Draco said, referring to an ancient megalithic formation deep in the forest that predated Hogwarts by thousands of years. How do you know? Ron asked suspiciously. I can feel it, Draco replied, his face unnaturally pale. It's calling to me. To the ring. As if in confirmation, the ring glowed visibly through the pocket of his robes, pulsing in time with the swirling vortex above the forest. McGonagall's voice echoed through the corridors, all students returned to their houses immediately. This is not a drill. Prefects, conduct head counts and secure all entrances. We need to get to the stone circle, Harry said, already moving toward the main staircase. Whatever they're doing, we need to stop it. Are you mental? Ron exclaimed. That's exactly what they want. It's obviously a trap to draw you out. Of course it is, Harry agreed. But if we don't stop whatever that is, it could affect the entire school. He turned to Draco. What do you think they're doing? Can you tell? Draco closed his eyes, concentrating on the magical signature. It's a summoning, he said finally, opening eyes that had taken on a faint green glow. They're using Morgan's approach to tear open the boundary between our world and somewhere else. The thinning veil, Hermione realized with horror. They're forcing it open completely. To bring what through? Ginny asked, having just arrived from her own class. Nothing good, Harry said grimly. We need to go. Now. Dumbledore, Hermione began. Isn't here, Harry cut her off. I overheard McGonagall telling Flitwick he left this morning on urgent business. Convenient timing, Draco muttered darkly. Or deliberate misdirection, Harry suggested. Draw Dumbledore away, then attack the school. As they debated their next move, the castle shuddered violently, stone dust raining down from the ceiling. The magical vortex above the forest had intensified, now sending visible tendrils of energy toward Hogwarts itself. They're attacking the castle wards, Hermione gasped. Using the stone circle to channel the energy. Decision made, Harry pulled out the Marauder's map. We need to get to the forest without being stopped by teachers. There's a passage near the greenhouses that comes out near Hagrid's hut. As they navigated through the chaotic castle, Harry felt the amulet growing increasingly warm against his chest, almost as if it was responding to the threat. When they finally emerged from the secret passage and faced the edge of the forbidden forest, the magical disturbance was even more apparent, trees swaying without wind, creatures fleeing in all directions, and the green vortex now a towering column of energy stretching from the stone circle into the sky. It's getting stronger, Draco said, his voice strained. Whatever they're summoning, it's getting closer. Can you feel who's doing it? Harry asked. Is it Mrs. Zabini again? Draco shook his head. It's someone more powerful. Someone who truly carries Morgan's blood. His eyes widened with sudden realization. Oh no. What? Harry demanded. My mother, Draco whispered. It must be my mother. The ring, it was hers. She must carry Morgan's bloodline, not me. I just activated something because of my connection to her. But you can use Morgan's magic, Hermione pointed out, confused. Because I'm her son, Draco explained, horror dawning on his face. I have enough of her blood to access some of it, but not the full inheritance. That's why the magic has been so difficult for me to control, it's not truly mine. So Voldemort figured it out, Harry realized. He's using your mother to channel Morgan's full power. Against her will, Draco said with certainty. She wouldn't do this voluntarily. Another tremor shook the ground, stronger than before. In the distance, they could hear shouts and see flashes of spell light, the Hogwarts teachers attempting to approach the stone circle and being driven back by what appeared to be Death Eaters guarding the perimeter. We need a plan, Ron said, ever the strategist. We can't just charge in. Actually, that's exactly what I need to do, Harry corrected. They want Merlin's heir. They'll get him. But while they're focused on me, you four circle around and disrupt whatever ritual they're performing. Absolutely not, Hermione said firmly. That's suicide, Harry. Not if we use what we've been practicing, Harry countered, turning to Draco. The combined approach. If I establish the framework and you direct it, we might be able to counter whatever your mother is being forced to do. Draco hesitated, clearly torn between fear for his mother and the logic of Harry's plan. It might work, he admitted reluctantly. But we've only practiced minor spells. This would be operating on a completely different scale. The principle is the same, Harry insisted. And we don't have time to come up with anything better. After a tense moment of debate, they settled on a modified version of Harry's plan. He would approach openly from the main path, drawing attention while the others circled around under disillusionment charms. Once in position, Draco would attempt to connect with his mother through their shared blood connection while Harry prepared to counter the summoning ritual using Merlin's approach. Remember, Harry told them as they prepared to separate, whatever comes through that portal, don't let it reach the castle. The students won't stand a chance. Just don't get yourself captured, Ginny said fiercely, squeezing his hand. We need Merlin's heir in one piece. Harry nodded, then set off down the path toward the stone circle, his wand in one hand and the now glowing amulet in the other. Behind him, his friends disillusioned themselves and moved into the forest, circling toward the ritual site. As he approached, the magical disturbance grew more intense. The air itself seemed to warp and twist, charged with ancient power that made his skin tingle painfully. Through gaps in the trees, he could see the stone circle ahead, 12 megalithic stones arranged in a perfect ring, now glowing with the same sickly green energy that filled the sky above. And at the center, just as Draco had feared, stood Narcissa Malfoy. Her normally immaculate appearance was disheveled, her face strained with effort or pain as green energy poured from her outstretched hands. Around her neck hung a larger version of the ring Draco carried, an amulet that was clearly Morgan's original, not merely a connected token. Surrounding the circle were at least a dozen Death Eaters, maintaining a perimeter while a tall, skeletal figure directed the ritual. Even from a distance, Harry recognized Voldemort's distinctive form. Taking a deep breath, Harry stepped into the clearing at the edge of the stone circle. Immediately, several Death Eaters turned, wands raised. "Potter," one exclaimed, "Bellatrix," Harry realized with a surge of hatred. Voldemort turned slowly, his serpentine face showing no surprise. "Harry Potter," he said, his high, cold voice carrying easily across the space. "How predictable. We were just discussing how long it would take you to arrive." "Let Mrs. Malfoy go," Harry called, stepping forward. "Whatever you're doing, it won't work." "On the contrary," Voldemort replied, gesturing toward the vortex above. "It is already working beautifully. The heir of Morgan Le Fay, once properly motivated, has proven quite capable of opening doorways long thought sealed." Narcissa didn't react to the conversation, her eyes glowing solid green as she continued channeling energy into the ritual. Harry could see now that she stood within an intricate pattern of runes carved into the ground, binding her to the circle's power. "And now the heir of Merlin arrives," as anticipated, Voldemort continued, his lipless mouth curving into a terrible smile. How convenient. Harry felt a chill. How much did Voldemort know? "I don't know what you're talking about." "Come now, Harry. The blue energy in Hogsmeade. The amulet you wear even now." Voldemort gestured toward Harry's chest, where Merlin's pendant glowed visibly through his robes. Merlin's blood awakened at last. "Blood carries memory, Harry. And I want those memories." "You can't have them," Harry stated flatly, scanning the circle for signs of his friends. "Where were they?" "The plan wouldn't work if they couldn't get into position." "I wasn't asking permission," Voldemort replied coldly. "Merlin's knowledge will be mine, extracted directly from your mind. The procedure isn't pleasant, I'm afraid, but your sacrifice will serve a greater purpose." "And what about her?" Harry nodded toward Narcissa. "Will her sacrifice serve your purpose too?" "Mrs. Malfoy volunteered her services," Voldemort claimed smoothly. "Once she understood the true significance of her bloodline." "Liar," Harry challenged. "You're forcing her, just like you're forcing her son to fix your cabinet." A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed Voldemort's face before his mask of calm returned. "Young Draco has been sharing secrets, it seems. How disappointing." Taking advantage of the momentary distraction, Harry expanded his magical awareness, searching for his friends. There, a ripple of magic to the left of the circle. Hermione and Ron in position. And behind the largest standing stone, the distinctive feel of Draco's presence, now amplified by his proximity to his mother. "What are you summoning?" Harry asked, stalling for time as he felt Draco beginning to work subtle magic, attempting to connect with Narcissa. "Not summoning," Voldemort corrected. "Returning. The ancient powers that once made British magic supreme among all magical traditions. Powers sealed away by Merlin himself in his misguided pursuit of balance." He gestured toward the vortex, which was now forming what looked like a tunnel or pathway through the very fabric of reality. Morgan began the work of accessing these powers. "I will complete it. And destroy half of Britain in the process," Harry countered. "Those powers were sealed for a reason." "Progress requires sacrifice," Voldemort said dismissively. "But enough talk. Crucio." Harry was ready for the attack, dropping and rolling as the unforgivable curse missed him by inches. Death Eaters moved to surround him, but Voldemort raised a hand. No. I need him conscious and his mind intact. Subdue him, but do not damage him. The brief skirmish that followed was exactly what Harry needed, a distraction that allowed Draco to strengthen his connection to Narcissa while Hermione and Ron moved closer to the runic circle binding her to the ritual. As Harry deflected and dodged spells from multiple Death Eaters, he felt the amulet growing hotter against his chest, almost burning now. Instinctively, he grasped it, and immediately felt a surge of knowledge, not just spells this time, but a deep understanding of what Voldemort was attempting and how to counter it. The vortex above had begun to stabilize into a defined portal, through which Harry could glimpse something. Not another place exactly, but a state of pure magical potential, raw and dangerous. If fully opened, it would flood the area with uncontrolled ancient power Voldemort hoped to harness but couldn't possibly contain. Now! Harry shouted, abandoning subtlety. Several things happened at once. Ginny and Ron cast powerful stunning spells at the Death Eaters nearest the circle, while Hermione released a prepared counterspell against the binding runes. Simultaneously, Draco emerged from hiding, his hand outstretched toward his mother, the ring glowing brilliantly. "Mother," he called, his voice carrying power beyond his years. "Fight him. The magic is yours, not his." Narcissa's rigid stance faltered slightly, recognition flickering in her glowing eyes. "Draco?" Voldemort snarled with fury, directing his wand at Draco. "Foolish boy. Avada Kedavra." But as the killing curse left his wand, Harry acted. Drawing on Merlin's knowledge, he cast not a shield but a redirection, a spell that didn't block the killing curse but bent its path, sending it harmlessly into the earth. "Not today," Harry growled, moving to stand beside Draco. "Ready?" Draco nodded, his face set with determination as he maintained a connection with his mother. "On 3. 1. 2. 3. Together, they cast the combined magic they'd been practicing, Harry establishing a framework of harmonizing energy that surrounded the entire stone circle, while Draco directed it specifically at the connection between his mother and the portal. Where Merlin's approach created possibilities, Morgan selected among them, in this case, the possibility of the portal closing safely rather than catastrophically. Blue and green energy spiraled together, weaving into a pattern more complex and beautiful than either could have created alone. The magic flowed through the stone circle, redirecting the portal's energy back upon itself. "No!" Voldemort screamed, recognizing what they were attempting. He cast spell after spell at their combined magic, but nothing could penetrate the blue-green barrier now surrounding the circle. Within the protective dome, Narcissa Malfoy gasped as Draco's influence reached her through their blood connection. Her eyes cleared slightly, awareness returning. "Draco," she whispered. "What have I done?" "It wasn't you, Mother," Draco called to her, strain evident in his voice as he maintained the combined magic with Harry. "Fight back. Take control of Morgan's power." With visible effort, Narcissa straightened, her hands still outstretched but now moving with purpose rather than compulsion. Green energy continued to flow from her, but its nature changed, from chaotic and destructive to controlled and focused. "I can feel her," Narcissa said wonderingly. "Morgan, her knowledge, her purpose. Use it." Harry encouraged. "Work with us to close the portal." The Death Eaters, meanwhile, had regrouped and were attacking Ron, Hermione, and Ginny, who fought back valiantly, creating a perimeter that kept Voldemort's forces from interfering with the central magic. Voldemort himself had begun casting a complex dark ritual, attempting to counter what Harry and Draco were doing. The air crackled with competing magical forces, reality itself seeming to warp under the strain. "It's not working fast enough," Draco grunted, his face pale with effort. "The portal's too established." Harry knew he was right. Despite their combined magic and Narcissa's contribution, the portal was still growing, the glimpse of what lay beyond becoming clearer, something ancient and terrible stirring in response to the opening. "We need more power," Harry realized. And suddenly he knew what they needed to do. The harmonic convergence. What? Draco gasped, struggling to maintain his part of their combined spell. Merlin's most powerful spell. It can realign magical forces across vast areas. Harry reached into his robes and withdrew a small crystal phial he'd retrieved from Puzzlewood the previous day, just in case. But it needs both approaches to work properly. Harmony and direction. Will it kill you? Draco demanded, surprising Harry with his concern. Maybe not if we share the burden, Harry replied. 3 bloodlines together might be enough to channel it safely. Draco hesitated only briefly before nodding. Do it. Harry uncorked the phial, and immediately the liquid starlight within began to rise, hovering between him and Draco. Mrs. Malfoy, Harry called. We need your help. Channel Morgan's power through Draco, not the portal. Narcissa, now fighting actively against Voldemort's compulsion, nodded grimly. The green energy flowing from her hands redirected, linking to Draco instead of the portal. The moment the 3 magical lineages connected, Merlin through Harry, Morgan through Narcissa and Draco, the harmonic convergence activated fully. The liquid starlight expanded explosively, enveloping the entire stone circle in a dome of pure, white light that momentarily blinded everyone present. Within the light, Harry felt rather than saw the magical realignment occurring, ancient forces rebalancing, the tear in reality mending, the portal collapsing in on itself with a sound like a thunderclap. The raw power being channeled through him was excruciating but exhilarating, both burning and renewing him simultaneously. When the light finally faded, the portal was gone, the green vortex collapsed. The stone circle stood unchanged, ancient and immovable as it had been for millennia. But the Death Eaters had been thrown back, many unconscious, and Voldemort himself was on one knee, his skeletal form smoking slightly as if burned by the pure magic. At the center of the circle stood Harry, Draco, and Narcissa, all 3 pale but alive, connected by lingering threads of blue and green energy that slowly dissipated. Impossible, Voldemort hissed, rising shakily to his feet. The bloodlines cannot work together. History is written by the living, Harry finished for him. And we're choosing a different ending. Voldemort's red eyes burned with hatred, but even he recognized the situation had turned against him. Most of his Death Eaters were incapacitated, and in the distance, Harry could hear shouts and footsteps, the Hogwarts professors finally breaking through whatever barriers had been keeping them at bay. This isn't over, Harry Potter, Voldemort snarled. Nor for you, young Malfoy. The power you've tasted today is merely a fraction of what awaits. With a violent gesture, he triggered some kind of prepared escape plan, all the conscious Death Eaters vanishing simultaneously via portkeys, including Voldemort himself. The sudden silence was deafening. Harry swayed on his feet, utterly drained by the harmonic convergence despite sharing its burden. Beside him, Draco looked similarly exhausted but triumphant, supporting his mother who seemed barely conscious. We did it, Draco said wonderingly. We actually did it. Yeah, Harry agreed, a tired smile spreading across his face. We did. Ron, Hermione, and Ginny rushed to join them, all sporting minor injuries from their battle with the Death Eaters but otherwise intact. That was bloody brilliant. Ron exclaimed. The way that light just, boom. Death Eaters flying everywhere. Language, Ronald, Hermione chided automatically, though she was beaming with relief. But yes, it was rather spectacular. Are you alright? Ginny asked Harry, her eyes scanning him for injuries. Exhausted, Harry admitted. But alive. The harmonic convergence should have killed me, or at least one of us. Sharing it between 3 bloodlines must have diluted the cost. My mother, Draco interrupted, his voice tight with concern. Narcissa had slumped further, the amulet around her neck now dormant, its green light extinguished. She needs the hospital wing, Hermione said immediately. Being forced to channel that much ancient magic, it must have been physically devastating. Here, Harry said, reaching out to help support Narcissa's other side. Let's get her back to the castle. As they made their way slowly from the stone circle, the Hogwarts professors finally arrived, led by McGonagall and Flitwick. Their expressions shifted from battle-ready to astonished as they took in the scene, the undamaged stone circle, the unconscious Death Eaters, and the unlikely alliance of Harry Potter and the Malfoys. "Potter," McGonagall began, clearly struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. "What in Merlin's name happened here?" "It's a long story, Professor," Harry replied wearily. "But the short version is, history didn't repeat itself today. Mrs. Malfoy needs medical attention," Draco added urgently. "Please." To her credit, McGonagall asked no further questions, immediately conjuring a stretcher and helping transfer Narcissa onto it. As they walked back toward Hogwarts, the professors securing the remaining Death Eaters for Ministry custody, Harry found himself walking beside Draco. "Your mother will be protected now," Harry told him quietly. "Dumbledore will make sure of it." Draco nodded, his expression a complex mixture of relief, exhaustion, and lingering worry. "And my father?" "That's more complicated," Harry admitted. "But you don't have to face any of it alone anymore." "Strange, isn't it?" Draco mused after a moment. "Merlin and Morgan's heirs, working together instead of against each other. Breaking a cycle that's lasted centuries. Maybe that was always the point," Harry suggested. "Maybe their magic was meant to be complementary, not opposed. Harmony and direction, working together instead of fighting each other." "Maybe," Draco agreed thoughtfully. "Though I still think my mother is the true heir, not me. The power she channeled was incredible." "You have enough of the bloodline to access it," Harry pointed out. "And now you understand how to work with it properly. That makes you an heir in every way that matters." As they emerged from the forest, they could see the Hogwarts castle silhouetted against the now normal sky, its windows glowing warmly in the gathering dusk. Students lined the walls and towers, watching their return with undisguised curiosity. "They'll have questions," Harry said, nodding toward the castle. "Lots of them." "Let them wonder," Draco replied with a ghost of his old smirk. "Some things aren't meant to be common knowledge." Harry smiled, finding himself in rare agreement with Malfoy. The full truth of what had happened today, the ancient bloodlines, the combined magic, the narrowly averted catastrophe, would need to be protected, at least for now. The Ministry would want answers, of course, as would the press and the wider wizarding community. But those concerns could wait. For now, they had won a critical victory, not just against Voldemort but against the weight of history itself. Where Merlin and Morgan had eventually turned against each other, their heirs had chosen a different path, one of cooperation rather than conflict. As they walked through the great oak doors of Hogwarts, students and teachers alike staring in astonishment at the unlikely group, Harry felt a profound sense of possibility. The ancient magic now flowing through the wizarding world wasn't just a threat but an opportunity, a chance to rebuild magical approaches that had been separated for too long. The war with Voldemort was far from over. The Horcruxes still needed to be found and destroyed. Countless challenges lay ahead. But today had shown that even the most entrenched patterns could be broken, that enemies could become allies, and that the future wasn't bound to repeat the past. For the heirs of Merlin and Morgan, a new chapter had begun. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.